Welcome, and thank you for joining me on another gentle journey into the past. Tonight, we'll step quietly into the echoing streets of ancient Rome, but not the Rome of marble temples, victorious generals, and pristine togas. No, tonight's story is slower, softer, and perhaps more honest. We'll be walking the uneven stones of the alleyways, peering into the dimly lit homes of the city's many unseen lives. Together, we'll explore what it was really like to live in one of Rome, its many towering apartment blocks called insulae, and just how difficult it was to make it through even a single day within their creaking walls. We'll descend, layer by layer, into the rhythms and discomforts of ordinary Roman life, a world far removed from the glories carved into triumphal arches. Then to the city of Pompeii, where a sudden silence preserved the details of ancient life with astonishing intimacy. You live several stories above the street, in an insula, a Roman apartment building made of wood, brick, and compromise. It's not built to last, and certainly not to be quiet. Your single window faces another wall, just a few feet away, and what little light trickles through is gray and dusty. You light a small oil lamp and hope it doesn't smoke too much. And finally, we'll end our long walk inside the marble halls of a Roman elite. Drifting through their slow rituals of luxury, status, and political theater, more likely you'll carry your amphora down several flights of steep, narrow stairs, stairs that creak, sag, and sometimes give way. Later, we'll turn our gaze to the life of Emperor Nero, whose story blends extravagance and tragedy in equal measure. But for now, sink deeper into your pillow and imagine yourself waking in a room, not your own room, in a Roman tenement. Otherwise, it's down the stairs again, out into the alley, and toward the shared latrine. If you're unlucky or in a hurry, you might simply empty your waste out the window. It's not uncommon. The streets below reek of urine, and worse. Roman law technically forbids it, but the law rarely reaches this high up. You must watch your step-open sewers run along the sides of the road. Sometimes they overflow. Stray dogs dart through the crowds. Beggars sit quietly against the walls, eyes half closed in the rising heat. They might arrive in time, or they might not. They are underpaid, and sometimes demand bribes before lifting a bucket. Your work is manual, repetitive, and never far from the clamor of others. For many insula residents, life is lived out, not in the home. Most insulae have no light at all once the sun sets. You will climb back up those stairs with numb feet and sore shoulders. The wood will creak. The lamp will flicker. Inside your room, the oil lamp gives a little comfort, but little else. It is hot. There is no breeze. The walls radiate the heat absorbed during the day. But on the streets, in cramped workshops, or over tiny stalls that line the lanes like barnacles on a ship, you hear the scrape of a pot being pulled from under a bed. You breathe in, and the air smells faintly of cooked lentils, mold, ash, and boiled vinegar. And below, down at street level, the clatter of hooves on stone, merchants pulling open their shutters, and someone shouting far too loudly about yesterday's bread. Imagine yourself waking not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the low creak of wooden beams above your head, and the faint voices of your neighbors through the thin wall beside you. It is still early just before dawn, but in this part of Rome, sleep is rarely undisturbed. Fire begins. The wood is dry, the walls are thin, and the streets are narrow. Fires leap from building to building in minutes. You smell the smoke before you see it. You run, of course, but where to? The stairs are choked with neighbors. Someone is shouting. Another is crying for help. There is no insulation, no privacy. You hear a baby crying 2 rooms over. You stretch. The mattress beneath you is little more than a bundle of straw, rough and scratchy. The air is already thick. There is no running water. Not here. If you're lucky, you might have access to a shared cistern on the ground floor. But before that, you need to relieve yourself. There's no toilet in your home. Perhaps there's a chamber pot, if you own one. Your fingers are sticky. The walls are damp. Thin film of soot clings to everything. Now, it's time to begin your work. You may be a weaver, a potter, a porter, or a seller of boiled eggs. You step out of your building, down onto the uneven stones. It is only mid-morning. Back home, someone has knocked over an oil lamp. It happens more often than you'd think. In the vigils, Rome's firefighters are still blocks away. If your building survives the blaze, you return to find everything soaked and blackened. If it collapses, as many do, you begin again. At night, the streets change. Torches flicker in the hands of watchmen. The neighbors argue. Someone sings. A cart clatters by. You try to sleep. Tomorrow, you will wake again to fetch water, step over waste, and work until your hands ache. And the city, vast and indifferent, will carry on. Now, we leave behind the crowded alleys of the insula and step into a different Roma city of marbled corridors, perfumed chambers and whispers behind embroidered curtains. In this next chapter, we turn our focus to one of the most controversial and endlessly discussed figures in Roman history: Nero, Claudius, Caesar Augustus, Germanicus. You may know him from the old stories: the man who fiddled while Rome burned, the tyrant who killed his own mother, the emperor who fancied himself a poet, an actor, and a god. But the truth, as ever, is slower and more intricate. Let us begin, not with fire and cruelty, but with a boy. A quiet, thin boy named Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, born into a powerful, unstable family. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was fiercely ambitious, perhaps the most politically savvy woman of her time. His great-uncle, the Emperor Claudius, was both his ticket to power and, eventually, a body in his way. Guided by his tutors, especially the Stoic philosopher Seneca, his rule began with promise. Justice was reformed. Public games were generous, and the people initially were pleased. Imagine the atmosphere in the imperial household. Ornate, yes but tense. This led to some of the first major state-sponsored persecutions, carried out with quiet cruelty in the amphitheaters and prisons. The people were distracted. The city was rebuilt, and the Golden House rose on land once crowded with tenements. He wanted to be loved not as a ruler, but as an artist. His public performances, where he demanded applause, grew longer, louder, and more extravagant. He toured Greece not as an emperor, but as a competing musician, demanding prizes that no one dared deny him. He played the lyre, sang in private performances, and even wrote poetry. These were not idle hobbies. They were obsessions. Rebellions sparked. The Senate turned. Nero fled the city in disguise, with only a handful of attendants. His relationship with his mother, Agrippina, decayed into deadly resentment. No one came to his aid. Eventually, a message arrived. The Senate had declared him a public enemy. His execution would follow. He had her killed first, attempting to sink her in a sabotaged boat, then resorting to more direct methods. His last words were whispered, "Qualis artifex perio." City sleeps beneath layers of volcanic stone, waiting to whisper its secrets. Her death removed one of the few figures who had kept Nero in check. Several impostors claimed to be Nero reborn, wandering the empire with liars and false promises. His name became legend, sometimes as a villain, sometimes as a ghost. Of the city's 14 districts, only 4 were spared. Many suspected Nero had started it himself to clear land for his new palace, the opulent Domus Aurea, the Golden House. Historians disagree. Some say he was out of town. Others insist he organized firefighting efforts and opened his own gardens to refugees. And they clashed with the expectations of the Roman elite. Every meal, every conversation, was loaded with possibility and risk. She may have smiled as she did so. Poisoning was not an uncommon solution. Affection was always laced with ambition. You were raised in marble halls, but you walked them as if on eggshells. At just 16, Nero became emperor, after the mysterious death of Claudius, officially due to mushrooms. Some historians suspect Agrippina had a hand in it. In his early years as emperor, Nero was not yet a monster. But Nero was not content to be simply an administrator. Then came the fire. In the summer of 64 CE, flames swept through Rome for 9 days. Regardless of the truth, Nero's reputation was scorched alongside the city. In an effort to deflect blame, he pointed the finger at a small fringe religious group, the Christians. But all was not well. His marriage to Octavia ended in disgrace and execution. Over time, his paranoia deepened. Friends disappeared. Senators feared his gaze. Rome grew restless. Governors in distant provinces, once loyal, began to speak against him. he hid in a suburban villa. Alone, panicked, he paced among the gardens and half-finished sculptures. Unable to bring himself to act, Nero asked a servant to help him fall on his sword. "What an artist dies in me." He was 30 years old. In the years that followed, some Romans mourned him, others rejoiced. But in truth, he was always human. A young man raised by power, consumed by fame, and slowly untethered from the world around him. And now, we leave his gilded stage behind and descend slowly back into the ash and dust of the southern countryside. Now, let your mind drift southward, away from the clamoring streets of Rome, past groves of olive trees, dry stone walls, and the glittering curve of the Bay of Naples. You are approaching Pompeii, a small but prosperous Roman town that in the year 79 CE was forever changed, then forever preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Today it sleeps beneath dust and stone, silent and sun-bleached. But once, it was noisy, lively, and very much like the places we've just explored. A town full of ordinary lives, lived in imperfect, beautiful rhythm. Grooves carved by traffic are still visible. So too are the stepping stones placed at intersections, allowing pedestrians to cross during floods or sewage overflows. Graffiti marks the corners. Jokes, insults, names, and slogans like "I was here with Livia," or "I hate this place." To walk through Pompeii now is to move through a moment frozen in time. A cast of a loaf of bread was found in the oven, baked and cooling when the ash fell. In another room, a skeleton lies near a door, holding a key. The streets remain, some still paved with original stones, worn smooth by centuries of sandals and cartwheels. You can still see the paint on the walls, murals of landscapes, gods, and mythic beasts faded, but intact. The countertop is built with embedded amphorae, used to hold wine and stew. Then, the pyroclastic surges, clouds of superheated gas and ash that race down the mountain faster than a man could run.
Ow.
By filling these voids with plaster, they created casts of the dead in their final positions, clutching, shielding, curled against walls. People were caught mid-motion, dogs curled up in corners, families huddled in cellars. Some tried to flee, some stayed. Its mosaic floors are perfectly preserved, and in the central atrium stands a bronze statue of a dancing faun, frozen mid-whirl. Mornings began with street vendors shouting, dogs barking, and children running through the forum. In one garden, the roots of ancient trees were preserved in the ash, showing exactly where fruit once grew. Slaves fetched water and firewood. Smell of bread drifted through the air. Midday meant heat and rest. Where someone skimped on marble in favor of painted stucco. Pompeii was not perfect, it was lived in. Afternoons brought gossip in the baths, debates in the porticos, and visits to the market. Another mosaic shows Alexander the Great in battle, delicate, precise, and fiercely proud. The kitchen is tiny, blackened with soot. Small clay cups are still on the shelf. This was someone's livelihood. Perhaps the owner lived in the back or upstairs. Let's walk slowly down one such street. On your left is a bakery. Inside, the circular millstones still rest where they were left. Further down, you pass a tavern, things history books often forget. And then there are the houses, some modest, others grand. The House of the Faun spans an entire city block, but grandeur did not spare anyone in Pompeii. The ash came in waves. First, a rain of pumice and stone, roofs collapsed, air filled with dust. When archaeologists began excavating in the 18th and 19th centuries, they found voids in the empty spaces where bodies had decomposed. But we will not linger on these forms for long. Instead, let's turn our attention to what these homes tell us. Not about how they died, but how they lived. Pompeii reveals a city of rhythm. Everyday tools were left behind. Bronze razors, tablets with half-written notes, jewelry scattered in bedrooms. A child's toy lying near a stair. Even the city's imperfections remain. You can still see places where graffiti was scratched over, where repairs were half-finished. And that is why it speaks to us so clearly now. Because here, in this quiet city of ash, we see not just Rome's glories, but its laundry, its gossip, its spilled wine and cracked plaster. So rest here a moment under the pale sky and listen to the silence where once there was laughter. The rooms still echo with the hum of daily life, preserved in stone, waiting to be remembered. Let us now return to Rome, but not to the crowded apartments or the crumbling tenements. This time, we walk through a broad, shaded atrium, where sunlight filters down through a central opening in the roof. You live not in an insula, but in a domus, a private townhouse tucked behind a modest-looking exterior. From the street, it might appear plain, but inside it is quiet, spacious, and curated with intent. Water trickles softly into a shallow basin below. A slave glides silently past. The walls are painted in rich reds and ochres, depicting mythic scenes and floral patterns. Every chair, every column, every sculpture has its place, and every object speaks of education, taste, and wealth. Some seek favors. Others are there out of obligation. You may give out small tokens, or a coin, or simply a polite nod. The main event is lunch or dinner, not the start of the day. The house is calm, but always staffed. Slaves sweep, fetch water, prepare linens, and see to the needs of the household. The smell of lavender and citrus mingles with the scent of heated stone and damp towels. Voices echo off the tiled walls. Arguments rise and fall. Names are whispered. Deals are struck. Literate slave may read you the news official bulletins carved on stone and posted in the forum. Recite poetry while you dress. In return, they may follow you to the forum later, serving as a sign of your influence. The dining room, or triclinium, is arranged with 3 couches around a central table. You recline on one elbow, propped up with cushions, while slaves bring course after course: eggs, fish, stuffed dormice, roasted meats, fruits preserved in honey. Politics in Rome is deeply personal, built on patronage, favors, and reputations. If not, your day may be quieter. No one drinks it straight. To do so would be vulgar. Someone begins to sing softly, and others follow with quiet clapping or murmurs of appreciation. Instead, the mood rises slowly, with laughter and clever remarks, games, and recitations. You lie back on soft cushions, beneath a painted ceiling, and listen to the distant hum of the city that never quite sleeps. A poet may perform. A philosopher may speak in riddles. There is debate, but it is controlled, performed more than pursued. Perhaps you dictate a letter to a friend in another province, or review accounts from your estate in the countryside. You are no longer poor. You are a patrician, a member of Rome's upper class. The floors are cool beneath your sandals' mosaics, made of tiny colored stones. Every action is observed, and your position must be constantly maintained. Appear weak, and your influence may erode. Trust the wrong man, and your name could be dragged through the forum. Even here, in these luxuries, Rome is a game of masks. Your day begins not with labor, but with presentation. First comes the salutatio, the morning reception. You sit in your study while a line of clients, free men of lower status, wait to pay their respects. Breakfast is light bread, cheese, olives. By midday, it is time to visit the baths. These are not private. Even the wealthiest Romans bathe publicly. But there are tiers, preferences, and rules. You may arrive with a small entourage, perhaps a body slave, a masseur, and a secretary. The baths are not just for cleaning. They're a space for conversation, gossip, business, and politics. You begin in the appetitorium, the changing room. Clothes are folded, valuables locked away, or watched carefully. Then into the tepidarium, the warm room where steam softens the air. Then the caldarium, hot and heavy with moisture, where you sweat. Finally, the frigidarium, the cold plunge to invigorate and awaken. The oils are rubbed into the skin, then scraped away with a stridula curved blade of bronze. By late afternoon, you return home. If you are involved in politics, you may spend time preparing speeches, attending the Senate, or meeting with allies. As the light begins to fade, the household prepares for the cena, the evening meal. This is the highlight of your day. Guests arrive just before dusk. The meal lasts for hours. There is wine, watered down to suit the pacing of conversation. As the evening deepens, the air grows still. Oil lamps cast golden light on painted walls, perfumed smoke coils from burners. You do not clean, you do not carry, you do not cook, but you are also never alone. And so the night ends, not with rest, but with quiet calculation. You retire to your sleeping room, a space, not unlike the insula dwellers in size. but richly adorned. It's outside, the insula sway in the night. Inside, your domus cools under marble tiles. Two rooms, one of sweat and one of silk, sharing the same moonlight. The thatch above your head is damp again. You wake before the sky has turned. Outside, the air is black and cold. Your breath clouds in the air, even inside the cottage, and you can see your fingers in the pale light of the fire's last embers. There are no windows, only a rough door. The floor is hard-packed earth, uneven from years of wear. You sleep on a straw mattress, shared with your family. You are a villain, a kind of semi-free peasant, bound to the manor by law and tradition. You must work your lord's land first, before tending your own small plot. There is no chimney. Smoke from last night's fire still clings to the beams above. You live in a hut made of wattle and daub branches packed with clay and straw, patched over many seasons. You guide the animals in long, crooked lines, stopping to clear weeds or unstick wheels. Your fingers are stiff, your back aches. The wind cuts through your tunic. You rise, not by choice, but by necessity. You owe labor. You owe obedience. You may not leave the manor without permission. You may not hunt game from the forest. You may not grind your grain without paying the Lord's miller. There is a field to plow, but it's not your field. If you're fortunate, there's a little ale. You're the distant ring of the church bell, echoing through the valley, perhaps to a nearby village fair once or twice a year, if allowed. You might see a juggler, hear a lute, or buy a new pair of laces. But mostly, your world is the same: fields, tools, seasons, sky. The day is not divided into tasks, but into tolerance is what you can carry, what you can lift, how far you can walk. Repairs must be made, fuel must be gathered. If the harvest was poor, hunger sets in by January. You eat dried peas, cabbage boiled too long, and crusts hard as bark. You pray for warmth, for survival, and for next year's sun. It marks the hora sexta, the 6th hour after sunrise. But you don't count time in hours. You know it by the sun's angle, by the work left to do, by the aches in your arms. Milk spoils quickly. Meat is rare, reserved for feast days or stolen snares. There is no sugar, no coffee, no fruit in winter. It's just what you can grow, store, or barter for. Breakfast is simple. Perhaps a piece of coarse rye bread, few onions. You bundle yourself in wool, rough and often damp. The fire is small. The air smells of smoke, wool, and damp earth. You tell stories, often the same ones, year after year. You pass the time until your eyes close, long before the stars have shifted. Leather boots if you're lucky, otherwise you go barefoot through the frost. You take your wooden plowshare, harness the oxen if they haven't been rented out, and trudge into the morning fog. In autumn, it returns in floods. You live in it. You sleep beside it. The manor reeve may pass by to inspect your pace. Priest might call you to hear a prayer, or the Lord's messenger might arrive with word of a new tax or a labor ode. You carry it indoors on your feet, again and again. The work is slow and heavy. The soil is dense with clay. Stones lie just beneath the surface, catching the plow and jarring your arms. And always there is mud. In spring, it clings to everything: boots, tools, hands. In summer, it bakes into cracks. By mid-morning, your belly growls, but there's little to pause for. You owe a share of your grain, your chickens, your pigs, and yet you continue. At noon, you rest briefly, perhaps, by a stream, sipping cool water, chewing a leek pulled fresh from the ground. Children gather kindling. Women tend gardens, spin wool, or carry water from the village well. Winter brings its own rhythm. The land rests, but you do not. You rarely leave the manor. And at night, after a bowl of thin pottage, you sit by the hearth. Outside, the wind rustles the thatch. The oxen shift in their pen. And you sleep, because you must rise again before the sun. This is your life. Cyclical, tiring, quiet, not glorious, but full of meaning known only to those who lived it. The rhythm of the medieval world, so steady, so slow, was not easily disturbed. Seasons came and went. Fields were sown and reaped, and the church bells rang through misty valleys in their regular, familiar tones. But in the year 1347, something changed. Quietly at first. A whisper. A rumor. Then a merchant ship arrived in Messina, Sicily. Then, Suddenly, your world, the manor, the church, the fieldwood, have felt unfamiliar, unsteady. It drifted into the harbor with its sails slack, its crew groaning or dead. Soon after, people began to die. And then, almost everywhere, the world changed. It rolled like fog through towns and across hills, slow in places, sudden in others. It brought a kind of silence that no one expected. You would have heard it before you saw it. Whispers from travelers, stories from a neighboring village, people disappearing, the priest growing pale, the reeve sealing his doors. You hear of entire families falling ill within a day. The afflicted burn with fever, mutter things they do not mean, and soon slip away, quietly or in torment. Entire households are emptied in days. In the countryside, there are not enough to dig the graves. Bodies are laid in shallow pits, covered with quicklime. In some places, the bells fall silent altogether. Laborers refuse to work unless paid in coin more than before. Some leave the land altogether, seeking better conditions in towns. Then the sound of hammers building coffins, nailing doors shut. The roads grow empty, market closes. The priest, who once stood proud in his robes, now stumbles during Mass. Land that once belonged to a lord, unworkable for lack of hands, is now up for lease. Wages rise. Lords negotiate with peasants rather than commanding them. The rigid structure of feudalism begins to bend. The Black Death, as it would later be called, did not come all at once. Imagine yourself in your small village. Others, the air, the stars, or divine wrath. And though the shadow of loss remains, so too does something else, a quiet, stubborn hope. A world touched by tragedy, but newly shaped by those who remained. Physicians arrive in long robes and bird-like masks, stuffed with herbs. The fields are green again, but dotted with weeds. The manor gate is ajar. The world feels thinner, softer, less certain. You might have inherited a neighbor's tools, taken in their orphaned child, or been asked to read aloud because the priest never returned. They carry sticks so they don't have to touch the sick, but they do little. Most do not return. One morning, a neighbor coughs, then doesn't return to the field. By nightfall, 2 more are gone. The symptoms begin with a fever, a deep aching chill. Then swellings, painful lumps beneath the arms, at the groin, under the jaw. Others remain behind, tending to the sick, digging graves, lighting candles that no one will ever see. You do not know the cause. No one does. Some blame the Jews. Many of the lords and clergy flee to the countryside, locking themselves inside manor houses or abbeys. Some villagers follow them, hoping for shelter. In some towns, wagons rumble down the streets, collecting the dead. Bell ringers walk ahead, heads bowed. But the plague was not only death, it was also disorder. In villages once ruled by custom and obedience, things begin to fray. Fields go untilled, oxen wander, churches stand empty. And indeed something shifts, because after the worst has passed, after a third or half or more of the people have died, there is suddenly space. Imagine walking through your village after the plague is gone. The cottages stand, but some are empty. But you have survived. The rhythm of life, though changed, resumes. A new spring arrives. Children laugh again. Seeds are planted, because out of that silence, something different grows. As the sun breaks gently through the morning fog, let us leave behind the village and manor and make our way toward the stone silence of an ancient abbey. You walk along a worn track through fields grown wild. Head rises the crumbling silhouette of a once great monastery. Its arches are hollow now, its cloisters open to the sky. Moss grows between its stones. Birds nest in its belfry, but the stillness is only surface deep. They were centers of learning, landowners, hospitals, scriptoria, granaries, and schools. Every day was divided by the bells matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline, each marking a ritual, a prayer, a moment of reflection. Some spent hours illuminating holy texts, adding delicate gold leaf to parchment pages by candlelight. Others scraped hides to make vellum or crushed lapis into brilliant blue pigment. But of lay brothers, children, and even the poor who were buried for charity, the monks moved quietly in procession, their sandals brushing over cool stone, their robes trailing like shadows. The mundane left behind, the sacred lost. In one abbey's ruins, an underground chamber was discovered, filled with strange glass vessels, carefully arranged. A forgotten infirmary? A secret lab? We cannot say for certain. But the presence of carefully ground herbs and dried flower stems suggests quiet healing, practiced in candlelit silence. They kept the records. They brewed the ale. They stored the seeds and healed the sick. Tiny errors in copied texts, slight shifts in ink color, reveal moments where the monk paused, perhaps for prayer or because his candle flickered. Margins sometimes hold doodles. A playful cat, a face with a tongue out, or even a monk grumbling about the cold. They prayed for the souls of lords and plowmen alike. Beneath the flagstones, within the broken walls, lie the secrets of a world long gone, slowly uncovered by centuries of wind, rain, and more recently archaeology. In the Middle Ages, abbeys and monasteries were more than places of prayer. Some records describe monks who snuck food to beggars or copied scandalous texts in secret. Others record theft, disputes, even love affairs carefully punished and forgotten. But for those who lived within the abbey walls, it offered shelter, purpose, and a way to serve something greater. Others lie jumbled, hurriedly buried during times of plague or famine. There are bones with signs of injury, healed or not. Traces of arthritis from long years of kneeling, of twisted backs from hard labor. One monk, buried beneath the altar, bore signs of a diet far richer than his vows might have allowed. Another, outside the walls, had been cast into a simple pit, exiled even in death. To step into a monastery was to enter a life ruled by time. Most spoke little. Many fasted often. Their days were filled not with idleness, but with ritual labor-copying manuscripts, brewing tinctures, tending to gardens, or caring for travelers. Yet for all this quiet order, the remains found beneath the abbey floor often tell stories of struggle, secrecy, and hardship. Archaeologists, digging carefully in the cloisters and under the old chapter houses, have uncovered long-forgotten skeletons, not just of monks. Some are carefully arranged, arms folded, wrapped in linen. Tools are found, 2 wooden combs, rosary beads, iron knives, wax tablets, medicinal jars. And then there are the scriptoria, the places where knowledge was transcribed by hand. One inscription reads simply, "The ink is thin, the night is long." These moments bring us closer to the people behind the stone. Despite their vows of poverty and chastity, monks were still humans subject to exhaustion, to pride, to kindness, and quiet rebellion. And yet, most endured in quiet faith. The rhythm of monastic life was not easy. Winters were bitter. Fasting days were long. The rules, especially those of the Benedictines, were strict. Today, only fragments remain. But those fragments speak. They tell us of lives lived in ordered silence, calloused hands and whispered prayers, of books painstakingly made and lives gently folded into the earth. So now, as the wind moves through the broken arches above us and the grass sways in the empty cloister, let us pause here and listen. Even in ruin, the abbey keeps its rhythm. We return now to the manor, no longer the fields or the cottages at its edges, but to the stone heart of medieval rural power. Imagine walking up a winding path through frost-covered grass. The manor house rises before you solid, rectangular, and watchful. Its windows are narrow, its towers squat. It is not a palace, but it is strong. Within these cold stone walls lives a family noble, landowning, and central to the life of the village. But today, we will not follow the Lord, riding off to settle a boundary dispute or attend court in the Shire. Instead, we stay behind. We follow someone often overlooked in the scrolls of history, but central to the rhythm of noble life. The lady of the house. Her day begins before sunrise, not with idleness, but with quiet responsibility. Her fingers are cold, but practiced. A maid helps her braid her hair. The air smells faintly of beeswax and rushes. She is already dressed when the light softens through the high. Glazed windows, layers of wool, linen, and fine embroidery pulled over stiffened shoulders. She steps quietly into the solar, the manor's warmest room, and begins her day not in leisure, but in oversight. But just as often, she is reading if she is literate, hearing someone read aloud. Letters responding to disputes over boundaries, tenants, and tides. Her hand may not sign them all, but her voice shapes their words. Psalms, a bestiary, or perhaps a letter from a cousin in another county. News travels slowly, carried by riders on long, muddy roads. The lady supervises the household, stewards, cooks, maids, nursemaids, and sometimes tutors for the children. She listens to reports on grain stores, deals with requests from the reeve, and manages tenants who come seeking favor or permission. She may rarely speak above a hush. She may walk softly on stone floors, but she is not passive. The manor is a world unto itself. There are accounts to review, letters to draft, linen to inventory, stores to check. Though she may not own the land in law, in practice, she governs much of it in her husband's absence. Beyond her chambers, the wind tugs at shutters. The dogs stir in the courtyard. A guard shifts his stance near the gate. Later, she might sit beside the hearth with her needlework, not idly, but with purpose, embroidering hangings, altar cloths, or clothing. Birth is dangerous, mourning is frequent, but there is rhythm and there is purpose. Wine, watered down. Meat if it is a feast day, or if a visitor arrives. But before each meal, she sees that the hungry are fed at the gate. Charity offered in bread and broth is expected of her. These are symbols of status, care, and industry. Her stitches are precise. Her eyes scan the room even as she works. A servant whispers a question. A child stirs in the cradle. Meals are taken formally, but without extravagant stench or bread, stewed vegetables, and perhaps dried fruits or cheese. Afternoons might bring a walk through the gardens, or a moment of prayer in the chapel. And always there are letters. Letters requesting dowries. Letters arranging marriages. In her gown of muted wool, she carries the expectations of family, the memory of lineage, and the weight of decision. Sometimes she instructs the steward on harvests. Sometimes she sends messages to abbeys. And in times of war or plague or absence, she commands. As evening falls, the fire is stirred, and the manor grows still. She kneels beside the bed to pray, her breath soft in the cold air. And in the quiet, her power remains not loud, not grand, but woven gently through every room of stone and timber. This is not a life of constant comfort. The cold seeps in. The candles are few. Tomorrow she will rise again, just as she did today, to tend the manor's needs with steady hands and quiet eyes. Imagine waking in the dark, on frozen ground, your blanket no more than a layer of straw, and your armor stiff from the dew. You are an Ashigaro, a foot soldier in the army of a lord you've never spoken to, fighting in a war whose purpose was never clearly explained. You are not noble. You are not wealthy. You have no horse, no tent, no servant to carry your things. You are one of many, one of thousands, itch with sore legs, blistered hands, and a dull growing hunger. Your armor is simple, patched together from iron and leather. It chafes when you walk. Your helmet is too heavy. Your spear, the yari, is long and splintered, the blade rusted around the edges. You may not even have a sword. If you do, it is not for elegance. It is to survive. Breakfast is a small handful of rice, sometimes with pickled radish if you're lucky. But on campaign, food is short. You chew slowly. You hide what's left, hoping the rats don't find it. Your stomach grumbles before noon. You hear screams, some sharp, others cut off suddenly. You feel the vibration through the yari shaft as it hits something soft. You do not think. You keep moving. The march begins at sunrise. Mud sucks at your feet. The man in front of you limps. The one behind you coughs. Another sings a lullaby to himself, over and over. A third stares into the dark, unmoving. You pull your cloak tighter and try not to think of tomorrow. The fallen are buried quickly or left where they lay. You look for food, for better armor, for coin. Your shoulders ache. Your belly growls. But the land you pass is still green. The sky still soft with spring. You think only of sleep, of a roof, of plain food, warm and steady. You feel nothing. You are numb. And for now, that is enough. You may not even see the enemy clearly until they are charging toward you, shouting in a language you barely understand, their banners flapping like wings. You carry your own gear blanket, bowl, flint, dried food, armor. The road stretches on, through through fields, forests, and narrow mountain passes. When you stop, it's often not to rest but to dig ditches, build palisades, or stand watch through the night. There is little honor in this, just duty. You share your rice when another man's bowl is empty. You laugh at the same old jokes, told in the same tired voice. You help one another strap on armor. You wait your turn at the stream. You endure together. If you fall behind, no one waits. If you complain, the officer may strike you with the butt of his spear, and yet you continue. Because if you do well, if you live, there is a chance, however slim, that you may rise. A bonus. A new weapon. A small parcel of land after the campaign, but few rise. Most return to their village, thinner than before, or not at all. In battle, the Ashigaru are often first sent forward. You do not decide the tactics. You follow, orders advance, defend, hold the line. Your boots slip on wet grass, the earth turns red, you stab forward blindly. You hear the clash of steel. When it's over, the victors loot the field. Then you march again. At night, the fire is small. The men around you whisper in low voices. One sharpens a blade with a stone. There is no glory here, no ceremony. Only the slow, endless rhythm of walking, fighting, surviving. Yet even in this harshness, there is a kind of brotherhood. And when the campaign ends, if it ends, you walk home in silence. You are an Ashigaru. You have done your duty. In the quiet halls of Japanese history, most names drift gently through time monks. Poets, emperors who ruled with ceremony and restraint. But then there is Oda Nobunaga, a figure who does not drift so much as blaze. But tonight, we will walk through it slowly, with calm reflection, like observing a fire from a safe distance, watching how it consumes, not in haste, but with purpose. His story does not comfort, it unsettles. Oda Nobunaga was born in 1534, in a time of ceaseless war. Japan was fractured into many fiefdoms, each ruled by a daimyo or lord, not especially admired. In his youth, he was known as a troublemaker, erratic, strangely dressed. And he would not just rise among the warring clans, he would redefine power itself. People called him the Fool of Owari, the province he called home. Few predicted what he would become. He fought and secured Owari for himself, using both sword and surprise. His soldiers were not always noble samurai. Many were Ashigaru, farmers trained for war. But Nobunaga trained them well, supplied them consistently, and gave them purpose. Thousands perished. It was a deliberate act, one of many. Nobunaga would break anything that stood in the way of unification, including ancient orders, sacred sites, or long-held beliefs. His banners, black with white characters, flew over fields of ash and triumph. His castle at Azuchi, built beside Lake Biwa, rose like something from the future. 6 stories tall, richly decorated, a marvel of stone and lacquer. The emperor reigned in name only. The real power lay with warriors, and they were constantly at odds. But Nobunaga launched a daring surprise attack during a thunderstorm. Imagawa was killed, the enemy scattered. Nobunaga entered this world as a second son, not the favored heir. There, surrounded by only a small retinue, he was betrayed. Rather than be captured, he set fire to the temple and died by his own hand. But Nobunaga saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. Where others followed ancient custom, he questioned. Where others hesitated, he acted. Only smoke, ash, and the sudden removal of a man who reshaped a country. When his father died, Nobunaga was expected to be brushed aside. Instead, he outmaneuvered his own family and allies. In 1560, at the Battle of Okayazama, he faced a vastly superior Imagawa Yoshimoto's army, thousands strong. The odds were impossible, yet the fire that lit the path, unpredictable, fearless, and often merciless, was Oda Nobunaga. But his echo lingers like the scent of smoke long after the fire is gone. He embraced new ideas, foreign technology, and brutal efficiency. While others scoffed at firearms, he adopted them. He equipped entire regiments with matchlocks to Negashima and drilled them in coordinated volleys. This was not the way of the old samurai, who prized duels and honor. It was the way of war reborn. The Fool of Owari was now a name whispered with both fear and fascination. Nobunaga did not rule by tradition. He tolerated foreign traders, welcomed Jesuit missionaries, and even built temples for European-style learning. Yet he had no patience for rebellion, religious or otherwise. In 1571, he ordered the burning of Inryaku-gi, a vast monastery on Mount Haya whose warrior monks opposed him. He advanced steadily across central Japan, defeating daimyo after daimyo. But power attracts danger. 1582, while preparing to march against the western clans, Nobunaga stopped to rest at Hanaji, a quiet temple in Kyoto. His general Akechi Mitsuhide turned on him, no warning, no declaration, just silence, then steel. We do not know why. Some say revenge, others ambition, or a long-simmering insult. Nobunaga, caught unprepared, was surrounded. His remains were never found. In a way, this end suits the story. No neat burial, no solemn procession. But his vision lived on. His successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, would continue the work of unification. And after him, Tokugawa Ieyasu would bring centuries of peace. A man who bent history, not with quiet wisdom, but with relentless change. So now, let us pause. Let the noise fade. Let the drums quiet. The warlord has passed. Now let us turn from the battlefield and the ash-covered past and walk quietly toward stone walls that still stand. Rising gently above the pine trees of Hyugo Prefecture, pale against the sky like the spread wings of a heron, is Himeji Castle. Known as the White Heron Castle for its graceful silhouette and whitewashed walls, it is among the best preserved fortresses in all of Japan. But beneath its elegance lies a fortress of cunning. Beneath its quiet stone lies centuries of silence, secrets, and stories. Imagine yourself standing at the base of its sloping walls. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, cool in the shade. The air is thick with summer heat, but the castle stands motionless, aloof. Even the most seasoned invader would lose their sense of direction. There are paths that double back. Open courtyards that seem like exits, but are traps. Angled walls that deflect climbing attempts. Arched gates hide slits above them, Mishiotoshi, from which defenders could drop rocks or boiling water. Here, in quiet chambers lined with tatami mats, decisions were made in whispers. Here, paper walls slid silently, separating rooms that could be rearranged with ease. The structure itself seemed to breathe with the seasons cool in summer, warm with charcoal braziers in winter. Though innocent, she was thrown into a deep well where she drowned. Her ghost, it said, rose from the water each night, counting 1, 2, 3, until she reached 9. Then a chilling silence. As you step into the maze-like outer corridors, you feel disoriented. That is by design. A place of ceremony, a reminder of power, stability, and heritage. The well remains covered now, its stones slick with moss. But the story still breathes. A place where defense and beauty lived side by side. Some rooms were built with intentionally sloped floors to resist fire. Others had false doors decoys for intruders. Himeji's walls bloom with plaster patterns, simple but elegant. The surrounding gardens, once utilitarian, have softened into serenity. And in spring, the entire castle seems to float above clouds of cherry blossoms. This illusion is intentional, just one of many meant to mislead. The interior stairways are steep and narrow. The ceilings are low. In every corridor there are hidden alcoves, perfect for storing weapons or hiding defenders. Himeji was not meant to welcome. It was meant to confuse, not because it was lucky, but because it was built to endure. It remembers the hands that shaped its stones, the sandals that climbed its stairs, the voices that echoed off its beams. Some long silenced, others still lingering. Its approach is a twisting series of narrow passages, high stone walls, and blind turns. But for those who lived here not as invaders, but as residents, Himeji was a marvel of balance. Inside the main tower rises 6 stories, though from the outside it appears to be only 5. Even the windows, some shaped like fans, others like bellflowers, served multiple purposes. They allowed light in. They framed the views. They let arrows out. The central keep, built of thick wood and white plaster, housed the lord, his family, and his most trusted retainers. But not all of Himeji's secrets were tactical. Beneath the keep, in narrow passages and earthen chambers, legends took root. One such legend is that of Okiku, a maidservant wrongly accused of losing a precious plate from her master's treasured set. Even today, visitors to Okiku's well sometimes report faint whispers or strange echoes. Elsewhere, archaeologists have uncovered hidden compartments, charms buried beneath floorboards, and tiny offerings meant to protect the household from disaster. Yet amid the tension, there is beauty. During the peaceful Edo period, Himeji was less a fortress than a symbol. It survived war, fire, and even the bombings of the 20th century. And now, as you trace your hand along its cool stone walls, you sense that it remembers. In the hush of the corridor, you pause, and for a moment, the stone seems to breathe. We leave behind the weary Ashigaru and the cunning stone walls of Himeji. Now, we step deeper into the quiet architecture of control, into the still formal world of a daimyo, a great feudal lord, bound by loyalty, burdened by duty, and watched by many. The morning begins not with noise, but with ritual. The room is quiet. Soft light filters through translucent shoji screens, painting faint rectangles on the tatami floor. The daimyo eats in silence, seated just so, each movement considered. He is not alone, but no one speaks unless addressed. A servant kneels, wordless, as she slides the door open. The daimyo rises with deliberate grace, his first actions already dictated by custom. Dressing is a process of layers, undergarments, followed by silk robes, tied carefully. A formal outer kimono, embroidered with the family crest demands, reserved for public appearance. The clothing is beautiful but symbolic. It declares status, declares identity. Breakfast is simple: steamed rice, miso soup, maybe a grilled fish. Letters from retainers, reports from border guards, tax summaries, supply records, every bow is measured. Every phrase chosen. Speaking too boldly is dangerous. Speaking too little may be seen as aloof. Each is examined, one after the other. A nod, question. A mark made with brush and ink. The tea ceremony, for example, chinoyu, is not indulgence, but art and symbolism. The guest and host move through preordained motions, sipping from handcrafted bowls, discussing poetry or weather, never politics. And yet everything is political. Evening meals are light, accompanied by music or reading. The day ends as it began, quiet formality. This is not idleness. It is ceremony, a language of posture and pause. He may meet with his wife to discuss matters of marriage arrangements or temple donations. They approve the training of pages. He may summon a ninja, discreetly, to gather intelligence from a neighboring province. He must travel to Edo periodically to serve the shogun, often leaving his family behind as hostages. He must entertain, calculate, and adapt. Soon, messengers arrive, carefully knelt, heads bowed.
Owls.
Scrolls are unrolled. Everything moves under watchful eyes. The daimyo's castle or estate is not just a home. It is a nerve center of political control. Calm, measured, precise. The very stillness of the daimyo is power. His restraint is his strength. This part of the day can last for hours. Outside, the manor-stirred servants bustle quietly. Gardeners tend the gravel paths. Guards walk slow circuits along the walls. Every action is observed. Every ally is a potential rival. Every retainer might be a spy. Then he sleeps, though not always peacefully. A setting of beauty, yes, but also of balance. Nature shaped by will. And it is not entirely private. The daimyo is under constant scrutiny, not just from his own retainers, but from the shogunate, the ruling military government. So caution governs all. Later. The daimyo may walk the garden's crushed white gravel underfoot, pines carefully pruned, koi rippling beneath still ponds. He may receive guests, other nobles or envoys. Each meeting is thick with etiquette. Even leisure is prescribed. Back inside, the daimyo oversees his household. Rarely does he raise his voice. Rarely does he act in haste. He governs not by shouting commands, but by exuding presence. At sunset, candles are lit beeswax and oil, their scent faint but ever present. And yet, behind this calm facade is tension. He must keep his lands productive, his samurai loyal, his taxes correct. He is wealthy, he is powerful, but he is never free. His entire world is a stage elegant, polished and always being watched. So he kneels in prayer or writes a poem in his study. He listens to the night birds outside. He watches the candle flame bend with the breeze, because in feudal Japan, even the highest must move carefully. And in this world of paper walls and painted screens, a whisper travels far. Imagine waking in the dark. It's not the comfortable dark of a quiet room, but the endless, horizonless dark of an Arctic winter. Outside, the sun has not risen in weeks. The sky glows faintly blue around midday, but never fully brightens. And inside your small snow house, the walls shimmer faintly from the heat of a single stone lamp, fueled by seal fat. You check your equipment, stored just above sleeping level, where the warmest air lingers. Warmth does not come from food, but from movement. A harpoon, carefully carved from bone and antler. Rope made from sinew coiled neatly. Boots comics dried near the lamp, lined with grass for insulation. The snow outside moans in the wind. It's minus 40 degrees, and yet the day begins. It has offered itself, some believe, and that offering demands silence and care. The bones will become tools, needles, even sled runners. Nothing is wasted. As an Inuit, hunter more specifically, a male head of a family band you rise before others. Time is measured by season, by the return of the sun, by the migrations of animals. You do not eat much. There is little to spare, perhaps a bite of dried fish or some raw blubber. There is only instinct, memory, and tradition, passed down not in books, but in motion. How to cut snow blocks, how to read the wind, how to know when the ice is too thin. Today you will go out onto the sea ice, that vast, deceptive plain where one misstep means drowning and sound is swallowed by wind. You are searching for seals who rise to breathe through small holes in the ice, and the ice groaning beneath you, you know that tomorrow will be much the same. You press your ear to the ice, listening for movement below. You do not chase them. You wait, still, silent, sometimes for hours. Your breath crystallizes in front of you. Your eyelashes freeze. Contrary to romantic images, it is not a fragile dome. It is sturdy, carved from hard-packed snow blocks, and shaped precisely. Inside, a single lamp offers both light and warmth. Walls may be lined with animal skins, the sleeping platform raised to capture heat. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with family, wrapped in furs, breathing together. When the seal surfaces, you act with speed, not noise, just movement. The harpoon strikes. There is no celebration. Animal spirit must be respected. You return to camp. The meat is divided. The blubber is rendered into oil. Hide is scraped clean and stored for clothing. Later, you help prepare the igloo. In the stillness, you listen. Children play quietly, shaping toy harpoons from bone. Women prepare hides or tend a lamp. There are no clocks. And always the cold presses in. It is not a visitor. It is the world. In this life, there is no wood, no farmland, no forge. The rhythm of this life is not exciting. It is not easy, but it is real. And as you drift off to sleep in the warm, close air of the snow house, it's the wind whispering outside stillness, cold, and the long, quiet waiting. The wind in your face howls with the same icy bite that has carved the Arctic for millennia. The cold never relents. But there is movement. Knut Rasmussen, a Danish explorer and ethnography, is somewhere out there riding in a sled, pulled by eager dogs, across the frozen landscapes of Greenland and Canada. You are no longer the hunter of the snow house. You are now the observer, the curious, the one seeking to understand the world you've been thrust into. In 1921, Knut Rasmussen began his 5-year journey across the icy expanse of the Arctic. This was not the quick, hastily planned journeys of some of his predecessors. His dogs pull with steady determination, their paws leaving deep prints in the soft snow. No, this was a deliberate, slow, methodical exploration, an expedition to understand the lives of the Inuit and their cousins, the Thule people whose ancestors had settled these harsh lands for generations. Rasmussen, known to some as the White Eskimo, understood something that few did. To enter the world of the Arctic is to step into a world of memory. His notes would later serve as a bridge between the Arctic past and the world beyond. The customs, beliefs, and wisdom of the Inuit were captured in his writings and sketches, a gift for both the Inuit and the wider world to hold on to. You do not simply observe the people who have lived here, you must listen, you must wait. There was no need for forceful gestures or loud words. The settlements Rasmussen visited were small, often scattered along the coastline or hidden inland, nestled between icebergs and glaciers. Each step of the journey reminds you that survival here is not just about being tough or fast or strong. It's about being in tune with the land, with the animals, and with the subtle rhythms of nature. It's about knowing how to listen when there is nothing to hear but the wind. Life depended on cooperation, as the group hunted and shared what little they had. But there was always a quiet individualism as well. Each person knew their role, whether it was hunting, crafting tools, building snow houses, or passing down the sacred knowledge to the younger generation. Everything was done in silence, each movement controlled, measured, respectful of the fragile, demanding environment. With each village he visited, he listened to stories told by elders around crackling fires. The rhythms of their tales spoke of ancient hunts, of spirits that watched from the sky, and of the land's long history. And you must respect the rhythms of life that have been carefully honed over centuries. The world was beginning to encroach on this Arctic paradise, with exploration, industry, and outside influence gradually making their mark. Knowledge of how to survive in the cold, how to navigate the seas, and hunt the great bowhead whales that plied the icy waters, how to respect and live in balance with the land. As Rasmussen's sled travels through the snow, imagine the scene. Snow stretches endlessly in every direction, a world of white on white, broken only by the jagged edges of ice floes or the occasional outcropping of rock. Rasmussen had a particular interest in the oral histories of the Inuit. These stories were more than entertainment. They were memory itself, passed down generation after generation to ensure that knowledge did not fade. Through his journeys, Rasmussen recorded stories of legends, of myths, of ancestral knowledge. But it wasn't just the stories that fascinated Rasmussen, it was the way of life. Imagine the unspoken understanding between the people he encountered. Life here is communal, yet solitary. As you travel along with Rasmussen, you feel the weight of history in the air, heavy, ancient, yet alive. But Rasmussen's journey was not just about recording the present. It was also about documenting a way of life that was already facing change. Rasmussen himself would leave behind the ice and snow, but his memories would linger. And so would the stories, the sacred knowledge of survival in the frozen north. The Arctic hides its history beneath layers of ice, snow, and silence. There are no crumbling castles or towering stone monuments here. Instead, the past endures in sod mounds, in the curve of a jawbone embedded in the earth. In the outline of ancient homes built from whale ribs and driftwood, long since buried by snow and time, a discarded tool, a broken harpoon tip, the quiet geometry of house pits, seen only from above. These are the remains of the Thule people, ancestors of today's Inuit. Their story is not told in books or carved stones, but in subtle traces. Let us step gently into one of these sites, somewhere along the Arctic coast. The land here is mostly flat, with distant ridges. Summer has come brief and sharpened the tundra blooms in moss and wildflowers, a permafrost softening just enough to reveal hints of what lies beneath. Archaeologists tread carefully across the landscape, taking care not to disturb the fragile soil. These were the people of the whale, their homes, their tools. Their culture centered on the migration of the great bowhead whales. Sometimes they find graves carefully constructed, marked with stone, oriented to the stars. The dead were not discarded, but gently returned to the earth, wrapped in meaning and memory. There is no grandeur here, no temples, no gold. Evidence that even in this remote land, connections stretched far, perhaps as far as Norse Greenland or Siberia. The Arctic was not isolated, was alive with movement even centuries ago. But beneath the surface, they remain. But the bones remain, massive whale ribs arched like beams, still marking the shape of the structure. Others are tightly packed clusters, families living near one another, supporting each other, enduring winter after winter. Not the kind born from conquest or machinery, but from deep, patient knowledge. The Thule people developed an intricate system of hunting and trade, using dog sleds, kayaks, and even large skin-covered boats called umiaks. The kind passed from mother to daughter, from elder to child not in schools, but in motion and memory. They traveled with the seasons, from summer hunting camps to winter settlements. Following the paths of caribou and sea mammals, these homes were dug into the earth for insulation, their entrances low and narrow to keep in the warmth. But here, nestled in the ground, are the outlines of semi-subterranean dwellings. Once home to families who lived almost entirely by the sea, the ruins are modest. The walls, once sod and stone, have collapsed inward. Inside, life would have been warm, smoky, and dim. A central lamp fed by whale oil burned steadily. Skins covered the walls. The air smelled of sea fat, damp furs, and ash. From these simple structures, complex societies emerged. Buried here, near the ruins, archaeologists sometimes find tools made of ivory, needle cases, or child-sized mittens stitched from animal hide. And sometimes they find something stranger, an object out of place. A trade bead, a piece of iron. These villages built from bone and sod stand as a quiet testament to human ingenuity. Knowledge of ice and wind, of animal behavior, of sky and current. Even the layout of the houses tells a story. Some are communal, with shared sleeping platforms and storage areas. Today, these sites are often covered by snow again, before the year is done. The wind hides them, the sea reclaims them. The bones still hold their shape. The past still breathes quietly. And so in these gentle whalebone arcs, we glimpse a civilization resilient, communal, and deeply adapted to a world we could hardly endure for a day. Imagine you are inside an igloo or snow house, not as a passing guest, but as someone who belongs. The world outside is blank and frozen, wind whispering over the ice. They were shaped with a snow knife off in bone or ivory and, stacked in a slow, practiced spiral. No nails, no wood, no rush. But here, within these white walls, it is warm in a way you didn't expect. It was layered with roles, expectations, and meaning spoken and unspoken. Even here, where the outside world is vast and blank, life inside the home followed a pattern older than memory. Not tropical, not dry, but close. Breath-warmed, softened by fur and lamplight. The snow blocks around you are curved perfectly, interlocking in a quiet dome. She tends the kullik, the sea-loyal lamp, carefully adjusting the wick made of moss or Arctic cotton. A poorly tended lamp could mean wet boots, undercooked meat, or frostbite. But a well-tended lamp meant warmth, light, safety. In this small home, it is a symbol of quiet authority. She watches its flame, low and steady. The lamp is life itself. It gives heat, cooks food, dries clothing, and keeps away the dark. This home is built for survival, yes, but also for structure, for ritual, for rules. One does not speak during certain meals. These are not formalities. An elder does not command, but she tells stories at night, and no one interrupts. Everyone sleeps close together. Privacy is minimal, but the closeness is not suffocating. It is stabilizing. Each breath warms the room. Each person knows their place. A guest may not be asked to speak, but a glance, a shared breath, tells them they are welcome. Time moves by the lamp's flicker, by the settling of snow on the roof, by the shift in the wind outside. Days are filled with work, but the work is purposeful, not frantic, not endless. These are rituals of respect for the animal, for the land, for each other. Because the snow house, like so much of Inuit society, was not chaotic. Look around, a whispered conversation. A sigh as someone drifts to sleep under a heavy fur. To your left, near the lamp, sits the woman of the house. It is a world structured and shared, made from snow, but filled with culture, roles, memory, and care. But the silence is thick with meaning. Food is shared from a common vessel, often eaten raw or lightly warmed. There are no forks, no sharp lines of etiquette, but there are rules. It is hers to maintain. Behind her hang lines of drying clothing. Everything must be kept dry. Wet fur freezes, and frozen clothing becomes deadly. She rubs mittens to soften them. She scrapes hide. She repairs tears with a fine needle carved from bone. In this world, women's work is not second to men's. It is parallel, equally essential, equally respected. Now look to the center. The raised platform where the family sleeps and eats. Everyone sits cross-legged. There is no table, no chairs. One eats in silence, one never laughs at food. Children know when to speak and when not to. They learn not through punishment, but through observation, through imitation, through gentle correction by elders. Status in the snow house is not shouted. It is not written in title, but it is deeply understood. A skilled hunter is not praised loudly, but when he speaks, others listen. There is an intimacy here of sound, of scent, of warmth. And beneath all this structure, there is stillness. There is no clock ticking, no schedules posted, no loud voices. The home is swept with quiet. You might hear a child's soft hum, the rhythmic scrape of a hide stretched taut. And in this slow, enclosed world, secrets pass without sound. Stories are told in glances. Disputes are handled through song duels. Romantic interest is shown by gesture. Information flows, but gently, without disruption. The walls are thin. The snow house is not just shelter. Tonight, you rest on that raised platform. The lamp flickers. The cold stays outside. You hear the slow, rhythmic breath of those around you. And you understand, at last, that in a land of ice, warmth is made not just from fire, but from shared breath and quiet respect. The sky above is pale and cloudless. The sun already high shows no mercy. You stand on the edge of the Giza Plateau, squinting across a landscape scattered with rising stone, half-chiseled blocks, shouting overseers, and long lines of men who look as tired as you feel. You are not a slave. You are a worker, part of the state labor force. You may have been brought here from your village for a season, or you may live year-round in the shadow of the monument. You chew a crust of bread, stale and hard, and take a slow sip of water from a pottery jar. You hope it lasts through midday. But either way, your day begins before the light stretches fully across the sand. Your body aches from yesterday. Your sandals, if you have any, are thin and torn. Pull, breathe, step, pull again. Smell of sweat hangs in the air, mingled with dust and limestone. You pray for shade, but find only your own shadow. You know better than to drink too much at once. Too many have fainted that way. Achanta begins monotonous. Deep away to keep time, to forget the pain. It is beautiful, yes, but you cannot admire it. Your hands bleed, your feet are raw, and your thoughts are already drifting to sleep. There are murmurs then, of curses, of omens. But the work does not stop. Not for grief, not for fear. You collapse onto a bed of straw if you have one. The air is still hot. Insects buzz near your ear. Someone coughs in the dark. Or maybe you're in the kitchen camp, stirring large pots of lentils or baking rough bread in a clay oven that's never cool. Overseers bark orders above it, and scribes observe, marking tablets with neat lines whenever someone stumbles or falls behind. That Pharaoh sees you, that your name might be written somewhere, that the gods will not forget. You join a dozen others with a thick rope in hand. Your heels dig into the earth as you lean and pull, the coarse fiber biting into your palms. Then it begins. The lifting, the dragging, the hauling. Limestone blocks, heavy and stubborn, are loaded onto wooden sleds and dragged across specially watered sand. Chisels striking stone, wooden sleds creaking under weight, men coughing, shouting, singing. Even in this vast openness, there is no silence. The rhythm is all that matters now. There are breaks, but they're brief. A chunk of onion, a date, if you're lucky. If your task is different today, perhaps you carry bricks instead of stone mud bricks for ramps, kill baked ones for storage huts. And then there is the noise. Always the noise. As the day stretches on, the heat intensifies. Your skin burns despite the linen wrapped around your shoulders. Water is rationed, and the worst days they are when something goes wrong. A collapsed ramp, a broken sled, or where someone crushed under stone. Evening comes slowly, and the sun finally dips, casting golden light across the half-finished pyramid. You return to your mud brick dormitory shared with dozens. And tomorrow, it begins again. But you tell yourself, as many do, that this work has meaning. Whether it's true or not, doesn't matter, because the stone must rise. And so, in the shadow of greatness, you close your eyes. The Nile flows steadily under a golden sky. Along its green banks, the world of ancient Egypt pulses with life-date palms shimmer in the breeze. Oxen move slowly across irrigated fields, and temple columns rise like fingers pointed toward eternity. But behind the grandeur of monuments and the formality of courtly ceremony, one name flickers faintly: Hatshepsut, and adopted the full regalia and titles of a male ruler, not to pretend, but to reign. She ruled Egypt for more than 2 decades, and yet, for centuries, her name was nearly lost. She was a woman in a man's world. A pharaoh who wore the false beard of kingship, her life begins quietly. As daughter of Thutmose I, a respected pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, she is raised in the palace, trained in ritual, language, and law. As great royal wife to her half-brother, Thutmose II, she fulfills the expected role: queen consort, ceremonial presence. Instead, she builds. But then, fate shifts. Thutmose II dies young, and the throne passes nominally to a child, Thutmose III, her stepson. He's too young to rule alone. The gods, she claims, chose her. She invokes Amun-Ra, the sun god, weaving myth into policy. Some scribes may have hesitated, unsure of how to address a woman king. Sculptors carve her image with broad shoulders, a square jaw, and the beard of kings. Her statues line the great temples not as queen but as ruler. Their massive colonnades open toward the dawn, and walls are etched with tales of her divine birth, her trade expeditions, and her dedication to Matha, sacred order of the world. And so Hatshepsut steps forward, not as regent, not as advisor, but as pharaoh. She builds her authority with care, cloaked in tradition. Not in a single moment of rage, but gradually, deliberately, perhaps by Thutmose III, once he gained full power. In the burial chamber of a nearly forgotten tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a tooth helped confirm a mummy as hers. Perhaps by successors uncomfortable with the precedent she set, this is not rebellion, it is orchestration. She does not wage great wars or expand the empire through conquest, not to stir the world awake, but to accompany it gently to sleep. A quiet story of a woman who once wore a crown carved for men, and who built a legacy in stone and silence. Temples rise beneath her command, none more famous than her mortuary complex at Deir el-Bahari, nestled into the cliffs of western Thebes. One of her most notable achievements is the expedition to punt a mysterious land south of Egypt. Ships carved with precision, sailed with goods, and returned with incense trees, exotic animals, and gold. The reliefs in her temple show the trees being planted in Egyptian soil, living symbols of prosperity. And yet, her reign is not without complexity. While the court served her loyally, and the priests offered daily incense in her name, there were limits to her power. Some nobles likely muttered behind closed doors. But Hatshepsut persisted, shaping a rule not with violence but with stability and vision. Her statues stood beside those of her ancestors. Her image gazed out across the Nile. Her name echoed in the priests' chants, till it didn't. After her death, her memory was slowly erased. Statues were defaced, inscriptions were chiseled out. Her name was omitted from king lists, but the stones in the end remember. Modern archaeologists uncovered her temple, reassembled her shattered statues, and pieced together the faint inscriptions that had once been scraped away. Hatshepsut ruled. She ruled not as wife, not as regent, but as pharaoh. And now, once more, her story is told in whispers. The air grows still as you step beneath the sands, into the hushed stone corridors of the Valley of the Kings. Time seems to slow here, far from the bustling Nile and sunlit markets. Here in the dry rock beneath the cliffs, kings were buried in secrets, sealed away with treasures meant to last for eternity. But eternity, as it turns out, is a fragile promise. In ancient Egypt, death was never the end. It was a transition, carefully prepared for with spells, rituals, and treasures everything the deceased would need in the afterlife, especially for pharaohs. This meant elaborate tombs, gold-adorned chambers, food offerings, sacred amulets, and ornate sarcophagi nestled deep within stone halls. They came with torches and chisels, sometimes with maps, sometimes only with rumors. To protect these riches, tombs were hidden carved into cliffs, their entrances disguised, their walls painted with warnings of curses and divine punishment. Yet still, people came. Tomb robbers, some desperate, some organized, moved in silence, under cover of night or deep within secluded valleys. Names were written down, confessions taken, fingers pointed. The punishments, though not described in full, were likely severe, but the crimes continued. Some were insiders, stonecutters, embalmers, or even guards who knew the layout, the secrets, the weaknesses in the walls. A tomb might survive a year, a decade, even a century, but few lasted longer. Beyond it lay the undisturbed tomb of Tutankhamun, a minor pharaoh, but the only one whose burial chamber remained largely intact. Ancient officials would arrive after a break-in to find shattered jars, burned linens, the coffin smashed or missing, sometimes even the mummy itself unwrapped or cast aside, and the iconic mask that has come to symbolize ancient Egypt itself. Many of the tombs we explore today were not found sealed and undisturbed, but broken, emptied, stripped bare. The hard stone, once carved so skillfully, sometimes gave way, burying what lay beyond. In some cases, tombs may exist fully intact behind layers of untouched rock, still waiting. Hidden in the layout, some scholars believe, are clues to lost chambers, perhaps the resting place of Nefertiti, or others whose burials remain unfound. Subtle differences in the plaster, strange symmetrical patterns. Most of those legacies slipped quietly into the dust, scattered by time, theft, and silence. All hint at doors not yet opened. Jokes, boasts, prayers. One scribe wrote simply, "I visited and did not find the tomb open." Another left a name, perhaps to be remembered, perhaps just to mark that he had stood there once. So came the Deir el-Medina trials, where records survive of the police investigations into tomb robberies. Even tomb workers sometimes returned later to plunder their own work, driven by poverty, or simply by the knowledge that no tomb could remain untouched forever. Still, some secrets did endure. In 1922, a man named Howard Carter pressed a lantern through a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings, and the stone remembers. What people tried so hard to forget? The boy king's tomb was small, perhaps rushed, but rich in its detail. Golden shrines nested within each other. Beds shaped like lions, but beyond the glitter lay something stranger. And elsewhere in the valley, collapsed tunnels remain unexplored. We also uncover messages, not just treasure. Graffiti, scratched hastily onto tomb walls, reveals glimpses of the human stories behind the stone. And even now, as researchers use radar, drones, and light scanning technologies, they find strange hollows, small inconsistencies, suggesting that Egypt's desert still guards secrets. The tombs were never just about death. They were about control, memory, legacy. And yet, tonight, we remember them not in gold or fanfare, but in gentle footsteps, echoing through halls where the walls whisper stories. Thebes, a name whispered by the wind across the river. Here, nestled between arid cliffs and the gentle sway of palm groves, the great temples stand in silent elegance. The temple complex at Karnak rises like a forest of stone. Towering columns, thick and straight like tree trunks, hold aloft the weight of heaven, or so it seems. This is the domain of priests, scribes, and sacred ritual. A place of incense and silence. A world of perfume and protocol. Painted hieroglyphs once bright with color now fade under centuries of sun, but their meaning still lingers. This is not a city of common folk. You are not a laborer today. You are a temple priest, a man of scrolls and chants, whose life unfolds in exacting rhythm. Each day as Ra rises in the eastern sky, your duties begin before the people stir. Scribes record every donation: barley, cattle, perfume, copper on long strips of papyrus. Storehouses are tall and filled with sealed amphorae, grain, cloth, and incense. You enter the inner chambers barefoot, freshly washed in river water. Every act is a prayer. You do not speak. You do not look the deity in the face. They are copied by hand, stroke by stroke, passed down through centuries. The scribes are quiet men, more scholars than priests, devoted to their ink and silence. Instead, in silence, you unwrap and wash the statue. Anoint it with oil and clothe it in linen, just as you would a living sovereign. Festivals come and go, Pit, when statues travel by boat from Karnak to Luxor, beautiful feast of the valley. When the living visit the tombs of the dead. A priest may cough quietly into his sleeve. Scribe may miscopy a glyph and erase it before anyone sees. A child may leave muddy footprints on the threshold of a sacred corridor. Smoke curls upward like a final prayer. The doors are closed. Sanctum sleeps. These two are highly choreographed, full of meaning but drained of spontaneity. And so do we. His wife tends to household rituals. Children play softly among carved pillars, watched by servants, who whisper warnings to stay away from the sacred zones. No congregations. Worship is private, structured, controlled. Before stepping into the sanctum, you burn a blend of myrrh and kefir rich, musky mixture of sweet resins, wine-soaked herbs, and dried fruit. The aroma fills the air, meant to please the gods and purify the space. In the darkness, deep within the heart of the temple, lies the naos, the holy shrine, where the statue of the god rests. The high priests hold immense political power, rivaling even the pharaoh. Yet their movements are slow, ceremonial. They walk in procession. They speak in measured tones. Outside, the temple's corridors are busy with quiet purpose. This is not just a spiritual site. It is an economic engine. The temples of Thebes own land. They manage laborers. They collect taxes. There are no public sermons. The gods are not companions here. They are distant monarchs to be appeased. In the courtyard beyond the hypostyle hall, temple women grind powders, prepare salves, and press fresh garlands of lotus and papyrus for offerings. Somewhere near the library of sacred texts hold scrolls so old no one living has read them in full. And nearby, in a residence framed with whitewashed walls and simple gardens, lives a high priest's family. Life in Thebes is not loud. It is patterned. Season by season, the rituals repeat. It is a world where stillness equals power. And yet, behind the protocol and polish, people remain. Even here, in this fragrant, formal world, life is full of gentle imperfection. And as dusk drapes itself across the colonnades, and the stars blink awake in the deep blue sky, the priests extinguish the lamps, one by one. Thebes settles into shadow. Imagine the smell first. Fish oil, old rope, salted hides, and tar. The scent of ancient trade is not pleasant, clings to the boards and barrels, seeps into your clothes, and stays with you even as you sleep. The sea stretches out before you, not open ocean, but the crowded, sunlit corridors of the eastern Mediterranean. Oars line its sides, and behind you, others row in a slow, steady rhythm. No one speaks much. Talking wastes breath. The sea, when calm, laps gently against the hull. Meat is rare. Warmth, rarer still. You sleep in shifts on the deck, sometimes with only your cloak to cover you from the chill wind. When angry, it lashes your arms with spray and slaps the planks beneath your feet. They do not always kill. Sometimes they take the cargo and leave the crew bound or marooned. Other times they take the crew too. You are part of the crew. You do not own cargo. You do not give orders. You obey, you row, and you work. You are aboard a Phoenician merchant galley, sometime around 800 BCE. The ship itself is narrow and long, barely high enough to stand upright in. Your day begins before the sun lifts over the water. It's the creak of oars, in and out, the salty sting on your lips, the distant call of gulls. A few will sing slow, low songs in an old tongue. One man carves tiny fish into a bit of driftwood. Another dozes, his head resting on a net coiled like a pillow. The occasional moment, rare but real, when the water glows in moonlight and the wind feels like a friend. First you check the ropes, then the cargo-stacked amphorae full of olive oil, salt fish, resin. And the most prized of all, purple dye, made from the tiny murex snail. It smells terrible, but it sells for gold. Meals are meager. Flatbread olives, maybe a few dried figs, and always water that tastes faintly of the clay jar it comes in. You don't always know where you're headed next. You simply go where the cargo and the captain led, and then there are the dangers. Pirates, lean and desperate, haunt the coastlines. To be captured is to be sold into slavery, traded in the very same ports you once stopped at freely. You may be shipped to Cyprus, to Egypt, or deeper inland, where your name and language no longer matter. But even if no pirates come, the sea itself offers its own threats. Storms rise quickly in this part of the world. You've seen friends swept overboard or crushed by shifting cargo. The ship is low in the water, and if it begins to take on weight in the wrong places, It may simply vanish beneath the waves quietly, without drama. Still, there is rhythm in this life, the drumbeat of the rowmaster. Some nights, anchored in a sheltered bay, the crew huddles around a small fire built in a clay basin. And slowly, the boat drifts, from Tyre to Byblus, from Cyprus to Malta to the far-off coast of Iberia, where silver is mined and traded for bronze. Your hands are blistered. Your tunic is damp and stiff with salt. You have not known luxury. You do not expect it. But you are part of something vast and ancient, a floating link in a chain that connects cultures, coastlines, and centuries. And in that quiet knowledge, there is a strange kind of peace. As we leave the swaying merchant galley behind, let us drift now into a new chapter of Phoenician Laodicea city across the sea. Born of trade, hardened by ambition, and destroyed in a blaze that shook the ancient world. Carthage, founded as legend tells by Queen Dido. A Phoenician exile from Tyre, Carthage began as a modest colony in what is now modern-day Tunisia. Just a safe harbor at first, nothing more than a crescent of coast and a few wooden buildings. But from these small beginnings rose one of the most powerful cities the Mediterranean would ever know. Warehouses made of timber and clay, narrow lanes filled with the scent of oil smoke and cured fish. Imagine it not as the great marble city of Roman myth, but as a living, breathing port, sun-beaten docks stacked with amphorae, but they brought back ideas, to God's customs, styles of pottery, and tales of foreign stars. They sent ships farther than any of their rivals dared. Beyond Sicily, beyond Sardinia, and even so it is set along the foggy coasts of Britain and down the gold-speckled shores of West Africa. The people of Carthage were not soldiers first, they were traders. Commerce, not conquest, was their original strength. Their merchant fleets traveled for months at a time, returning laden with tin, amber, ivory, and exotic animals no one in the eastern Mediterranean had ever seen. The inner harbor, almost perfectly round, housed the city's naval fleet, protected by stone walls and lined with rows of covered docks. This was where ships were repaired, stored, and launched. And at home, the city changed. The buildings grew taller, the streets more complex, markets expanded. Temples rose. Hannibal, son of a Carthaginian general, crossed the Alps with elephants and soldiers to strike Rome from the north. It was bold, brilliant, and eventually futile. Two harbors were carved from the coastline, one for trade, the other for war. Carthage would not be negotiated with. It would not be tolerated. It would be erased. He returned to Carthage, aging and hunted, while Rome regrouped and struck back. Carthage became more than a city, it became a rival. To the Greeks and to Rome. As its wealth grew, so did its reach. Carthaginian colonies sprouted like waypoints along the sea, in Spain, Sardinia, Corsica, and beyond. With these territories came silver mines, slave markets, and vast agricultural estates. The fighting inside was bitter, house by house. Flames consumed the buildings, statues shattered, scrolls turned to ash. Men, women, and children were killed or enslaved. But power, like the tide, brings friction. Rome, a new force rising in the west, had begun to stretch its fingers across the same sea. Conflict was inevitable, that nothing would ever grow there again. But this, like so much history, is more poetry than truth. The Punic Wars began. First war bled both sides dry. The second was legend. Though Hannibal won battles, he could not win the war. The Third Punic War was different. Rome, by then, had made a decision. In 146 BCE, after a brutal siege, the Romans breached the city walls. Carthage, the city of sailors, merchants, and engineers, was no more. Later Roman writers would claim the soil was salted. Still, in its silence, Carthage speaks. Through ruins, through shipwrecks, through faint echoes of its once vast economy. It reminds us that empires built on trade may rise without swords, but they fall all the same. And so, the sea moved on. Its waves washed over broken docks. Its winds scattered ashes. But the name Carthage lingered, long after the fire died. Now, let us descend not into memory, but into stillness. Not into cities, but into the deep, quiet seabed, where time moves differently. And history is not written in ink, but preserved in silt, and Fari resting gently on the ocean floor, anchors buried in sand. Stone columns that once held up temples now softened by coral and the passing of fish. Below the churning waters of the Mediterranean, there lie remnants of another world. This is where the Phoenicians remain, not in monuments or statues, but in the cargo they left behind. For centuries, the Phoenicians launched ships across the seas lender, long-hulled galleys crafted from cedar and cypress. Some were merchant vessels, others perhaps scouts or silent messengers, but not all made it home. The sea, always unpredictable, claimed many. Storms overtook them, rocks splintered their hulls, pirates intercepted them. Sometimes no one ever knew why a ship vanished, just that it never returned. And yet, in a curious way, the sea preserved them. Unlike land, where wood rots and iron rusts under constant change, the seabed holds on gently, stubbornly. Under layers of sand in cold, oxygen-poor depths, cargoes rest as if untouched, waiting centuries to be seen again. In the last century, divers and archaeologists have uncovered a growing number of Phoenician shipwrecks, often by accident. While dredging or laying cables, one of the oldest known Phoenician wrecks lies off the coast of Mallorca in Spain's Balearic Islands. Others hold resin or dried fish, or even traces of purple dye. The famous Tyrian purple, the most prized commodity in the ancient world, made painstakingly from the murex sea snail. Perhaps just a mark of ownership, no one knows. A small vial of it was worth more than its weight in gold. It's not a dramatic sight, just to outlines in the sand, shaped by timbers and clay jars. But these humble amphorae tell stories. Carthaginian coinage found deep in Sardinia, Levantine silver in Spain. Each coin a breadcrumb leading back through storm and silence. And so, archaeology becomes guesswork, careful, delicate, humbling. Some contain olive oil, sealed tight by pitch. Elsewhere, near Tunisia, parts of sunken harbor structures have been discovered, massive stone blocks with tool marks, suggesting quays, piers, and breakwaters lost to rising seas or earthquake. No speeches or epics. It's only the weight of time and the muted beauty of what was left behind. And then, there are stranger finds. Near the ancient city of Matia in Sicily, underwater excavations have revealed what may have been ceremonial platforms or causeway structures. Now fully submerged but once central to sacred Phoenician rites, some ruins contain child-sized urns, carefully buried in seabeds near temple sites, raising difficult, still unsettled questions about ancient funerary practices and how coastal life blended belief with tide and time. A single bent bronze brooch caught between planks. In Cyprus, divers found a Phoenician anchor carved with inscriptions. The symbols are faint but unmistakably Phoenician. A name, a blessing? That. But the soft hush of salt water over stone, and the enduring mystery of what the sea chose to keep. And throughout the underwater Mediterranean, from Lebanon to Spain, coin hoards occasionally surface sealed in jars, encrusted in salt, the edges still bearing royal faces or maritime symbols, ships, horses, stars. These coins, when cleaned and studied, reveal trade routes once believed impossible. But beyond the artifacts, perhaps what the sea has best preserved is absence. Absence of writing, absence of full explanation. Phoenician records were rarely kept in durable form, and most were never meant to last. Each wreck is a question. Who was aboard? What were they fleeing or seeking? Was the storm sudden? Were the pirates silent? No voices remain, just broken amphorae, timber beams, dark with age. In this quiet underworld, there is no grandeur. It is, perhaps, the most honest portrait of the Phoenician world, not the noise of empire or the pride of city walls. As we leave behind the sunken decks and shadowed amphorae of the seafloor, let us drift gently ashore, toward the warm, dry stones of the Phoenician coast, to tire the beating heart of an ancient maritime empire. His name has faded with the scrolls that once recorded it, but his way of life remains, pieced together from traces and echoes. The year is not exact, the century blurs, but the setting is timeless. Cedar beams run overhead, fragrant even after years of seasoning. Through an open window, the sea breeze carries the scent of salt, wine, and crushed figs. A shallow fountain murmurs near its center, cool water trickling over black stone. You hear the flutter of a pigeon's wings above, and the distant roll of ox carts in the street beyond. It is not loud. It does not need to be. You are in the home of a Phoenician merchant, prince a tycoon of dyes, timber, and ships. Here, in a sprawling villa of cut limestone, cool to the touch and pale like worn ivory, life moves slowly, precisely, methodically. The walls are thick, built to keep in shade and quiet. He will nod to shipbuilders, ask about hull repairs, inspect a crate of copper ingots fresh from the mines of Iberia. This is a world of measured wealth, the kind that speaks softly but settles deep into every corner. His wife, dressed in soft wool robes, manages the inner household. She oversees textiles, stores, and the complex calendar of religious offerings. Every few days, she may visit a shrine, leaving honey cakes or oil at the altar of Astarte. He reads from a scroll. It's not religious. It's not poetry. It is an inventory: timber shipped to Egypt, glass sold in Gador, snails harvested near the cliffs for the next dye batch. A teacher comes daily, a former scribe, perhaps from Ugarit, patient and stern. The courtyard is tiled in patterns of blue and ochre, swept clean each morning by servants. The power here lies in control, knowing more than one speaks, and possessing more than one displays. Inside, the air is still and scented burnt myrrh, a pinch of cinnamon bark, and the lingering temps of olive oil lamps. Musicians may play a reed flute, a three-stringed lyre. It is this: the soft power of trade, of calculation, of quiet days filled with silent choices. Couriers arrive bearing news of weather delays off the coast of Cyprus, of price changes in papyrus markets, of new Roman interest in luxury fabrics. Letters are dictated to scribes in calm, even tones addressed to partners in Byblos, Alexandria, or Sardinia. And above them, the stars clear, sharp, and ancient trace paths the Phoenicians once followed into the unknown. The master of the house, wrapped in a long linen robe, dyed faintly with Tyrian purple just enough to show taste. Not arrogant, sits at a carved low table. This is his realm: commerce and correspondence. Each day is built around quiet dealings. Servants come and go, silently bringing dates or a silver dish of honey-soaked barley cakes. Nothing is hurried. Everything is accounted for. Later in the day, the merchant might walk to the port shaded by an umbrella borne by an attendant. He does not lift the crate, does not need to. Back at home, his family villa is a quiet hive of carefully arranged people. There are children learning letters, numbers, and the proper names of the gods. Evenings pass gently. By sunset, the rooftops catch a soft amber glow. Lamps are lit, small terracotta bowls with trembling flames. The family gathers in the courtyard. There is no shouting, no laughter louder than a hush. The servants eat later, in the rear wing. Their food is simpler: barley, lentils, dried fish, but even that is seasoned with olive oil, the mark of a well-run house. At night, the villa grows still. A heavy wool curtain is drawn over the doorway. Coals burn low in bronze braziers. Cat stalks softly across the mosaic floor. And in the master's chamber, scrolls are rolled and stored. Sandals placed precisely at the bedside, and the silence of Tyre returns. Out beyond the city walls, ships swayed gently in their berths, tethered and sleeping. But here in this house of paper walls and cedar ceilings, life is about knowing the prices of grain, the moods of distant kings, the movement of tides, and the slow, deliberate turning of fortune. It is not the glory of an empire that defines the Phoenicians, nor their forgotten alphabet. And as the night deepens, and the merchant dreams of ships returning home, a last breeze drifts through the slats, carrying the scent of distant cinnamon and the memory of the sea. The sky is gray with no hint of blue. It's early, but already the cold has found you. Imagine yourself waking in a Viking fishing village along the Norwegian coast. The year doesn't matter. The century shifts, but the cold remains the same. You sleep beside three. Others: your brother, an aging uncle, and a boy who isn't kin, but was taken in after a harsh winter emptied his house. Your bed is not a bed, just a pile of animal skins on a raised wooden platform, tucked against the sod walls of your hut. Smoke hangs beneath the roof beams, seeping from the hearth, but not quite escaping through the smoke hole. You cough softly and sit up. The room is low and dim. You pull on woolen tunics, damp from yesterday's mist. The fabric smells faintly of fish, smoke, and unwashed sweatbutt. These scents are as natural here as salt in the air. Outside, the gulls are already crying, a sure sign the tide has returned. Perhaps 15 homes clustered unevenly along the narrow strip between the steep hillside and the sea. The homes are mostly sod-roofed, low to the ground, patched with driftwood and turf. Their doors face inward, toward each other, sheltering from the wind. The morning fog wraps around you like a damp blanket. Your hands go numb, then red, then forget they were ever warm. You rise without speaking. Speech in the morning is slow to come. He spits into the sea, mutters about gods who no longer listen, and pulls in the rope. A small cod flaps once, then goes still. There is no breakfast yet. There may not be until noon. You chew a hard crust of barley bread from the larder and wrap your hands in worn leather to fend off the cold. You stand beside it and the work begins. The scent is strong. Brine, blood, decayed, but familiar. Children run past with small baskets. Dogs sniff the piles of discarded viscera, snapping at gulls bold enough to land. Then, you head down to the shore. You and your kin will take one out today. But as the sun begins to dip soft, amber light brushing the fjord, you at last return to your home. Occasionally something better seal, perhaps, or a stranded whale. It's thin and warm. You slurp it down, wiping your chin with your sleeve. But most days, it's cod. You've come to know its scales, its gills, the way its eyes cloud when the air hits them. You know how to gut one without thinking. Slice, scoop, rinse, again and again. The village is not large. Boats rock gently in the shallows, long, narrow vessels carved from pine, patched again and again with iron nails and whale sinew. The water, though dark, is calm, and you must fish. There is no other choice. The sea provides cod and herring. Beside you, the others settle in, their breath slow, noses red with cold. You row out, muscles aching, but practiced. Hours pass. Nets are cast, lines are checked. Your uncle says little. This rhythm-silent labor, cold hands, salt in every cut is the rhythm of your life. Eventually, the boat returns, heavier by a few dozen fish. You drag it to shore. No help arrives. Everyone is hauling something. Then begins the gutting. There is a table, stained deep red from years of use. Your fingers, though stiff, know the motions. Open the belly, scoop with the thumb, slice the gills. Repeat. Behind you, the smokehouse crackles faintly. Inside hang older fish, drying slowly over alder wood.
Ow.
Tomorrow, more will join them. By midday, your shoulders ache, your stomach growls.
Ow.
Someone hands you a ladle of fish stew. Then you go back to the gutting. This is the cycle. Fish, clean, dry, salt, repeat. The sea is both provider and tyrant. Evening brings little rest. There's a net to mend, child to scold, a roof to patch before the next rain. Inside, the hearth glows faintly. The smoke still stings. You pull the skins around your shoulders. You close your eyes. And in the quiet, you can still feel the boat rocking, even as you lie on land. The ocean stretches out before you, a cold expanse of gray-green water that seems to have no end. The horizon blurs into mist, and above, gulls wheel in quiet arcs beneath a low, pale sun. The sail is up, stretched taut in the wind. The oars rest for now. There is only the creak of timber, the slap of waves, and the constant chill that settles into your bones. Now imagine yourself not as a fisher or farmer, but as a sailor, one of the crew aboard a Norse Nair, kind of broad-bellied cargo ship used not for raiding but for exploration, with rivers that run without ice. A land called Vinland. You are at sea. Your leader is Leif Eriksenthal, quiet, known to many simply as Leif the Lucky. The son of Eric the Red, who had once carved a home from the ice of Greenland, Leif is setting out from that same cold colony. The ship was loaded with provisions, barrels of dried fish, smoked lamb, sour whey, and ropes of dried kelp. Water casks, spare timber, and axes. Always axes. But unlike his father, who turned west out of necessity after exile, Leif follows whispers. Night spent, wet and sleepless, curled under damp hides. The way the villagers watched, some offered blessings, others only stared. Your mother gave you a pouch of dried berries to remind you of summer. You haven't opened it yet. A low, stony shore. You make landfall in the morning. 2 more days, he might say. Or we drift too far south, flat. It's called Helluland, the land of flat stones. You walk on sand, gather driftwood, and drink from a stream that tastes faintly of ice. This is Markland, the land of forests. It is better, but still, Leif is not satisfied. You spend a night there. The air smells clean, but there is nothing to eat. Leif marks it on memory, then moves on. Stories told in hushed voices over smoky fires of a land farther west, forested, fertile. He believes it's real. You're not as sure. Grapes grow on vines that twist around the trunks, unfamiliar and wild. The men begin to murmur. Could this be Vinland? The voyage began from one of the few green patches in southern Greenland, where sheep graze and the cold wind cuts down from the glacier. You remember the launch? Nights around the fire, speaking softly, watching the smoke twist toward the ceiling beams. The sea has not been kind. The North Atlantic is always restless, and vanish again into the trees. Storms have come and passed. Rain so heavy it stung the eyes. Swells that threw you across the deck. Days spent bailing water, but Leif never seemed afraid. He would stand at the prow, one hand on the carved dragon's head, the other on the tiller. You find salmon in the rivers, wood for building. Fresh berries. It feels like a reward. It's not ghosts, but people. Dark-haired, light-footed, silent, his eyes scanning the clouds, watching the seabirds, feeling the wind. Others say he merely drifted where others had glimpsed before, and that you were there rocking endlessly on the gray waves, tasting salt on your lips, listening to the sails groan in the wind as the edge of the known world disappeared behind you. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it is simple, calm. One night, weeks into the journey, someone spots land. The coast is barren. A fever took many in your absence. Your house still stands, but someone else lives there now. You don't ask why. Later, a greener coast appears. You sail again, for days. Then one morning you smell something new, earthy, sweet, the scent of green. You see birds, many birds, and the water grows warmer. Then at last, land again. This one feels different. The grass is thick, the trees tall. You build a camp. The weather is gentle, so different from the biting air of Greenland. You spend the winter there. In low, timber-framed houses built hurriedly with Norse hands. Days are spent hunting, fishing, cutting wood, but peace is brief. One morning you see them shadows in the woods. The Skrylings, you are told. The native people. They do not attack at first. They watch, trade a bit of fur for a red cloth. But soon there is tension. One of your crew strikes a man, an argument, a stone thrown, then a spear. You leave quickly. The peace was not meant to last. You load the ship with timber and grapes, with skins and stories, and you turn eastward. The wind is colder on the way home, the sails wear thin, your skin is cracked and salt-burned. But Leif still stands at the prow, unshaken. When you reach Greenland, the colony is smaller than you remember. Leif says little of the journey, but the tales spread, of a land across the sea, green and rich, and so others will follow. Some say he was the first European to reach North America, but what matters in the end is that he went. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a windswept tundra, where the cold air is sharp and still, and the ground crunches beneath your boots. Before you lie, the scattered remains of houses' low stone foundations half buried beneath moss and snow, crumbled walls that once sheltered families, now whispering silent stories to the wind. This is Greenland, not the frozen wilderness of today, but the home of a forgotten Norse settlement, begun centuries ago in a small window of milder climate. Over the next few centuries, farms were carved out of the rocky soil. They traded with Europe for iron tools, timber, and luxury goods, sending their prized walrus ivory in return. Sod houses were built, their roofs heavy with grass, thick with the scent of earth and smoke from peat fires. The Vikings arrived here around the year 985, led by Uruk the Red, a man who found exile in this harsh land, but planted the seeds of a new world. The settlers raised sheep and cattle, hunted seals and walrus along the shore, and fished in the cold fjords. But life here was a constant challenge. The supply ships from Iceland and Norway grew fewer and more unreliable. Salted fish and grain shipments dwindled. Imagine the relentless winter's months of twilight, snow piled high, and ice stretching across the fjord. Food was scarce, soil was thin, and crops often failed. A harsh wind would whip through the valley, carrying the scent of sea and stone. But the thin grasses grew ever thinner, overgrazed and trampled by herds. Starvation whispered at the edges of the community. In such conditions, even small failures could become disasters. But others argue the Norse remained isolated, clinging to old ways and unable to adapt fully to their changing environment. For centuries, the Greenland Norse survived through careful planning and stubborn resilience. But gradually, the threads holding their world together began to fray. The Little Ice Age crept in, a slow creeping chill that shortened growing seasons and thickened sea ice, making travel and trade more difficult. Communication with the outside world faded into silence. You imagine the lives that once filled this place. Children chasing each other through narrow paths, the crackling of peat fires, the low murmur of prayers and stories told around the hearth. Locally, isolation bred hardship. The settlers depended heavily on their livestock, cattle, sheep, goats for food, clothing, and trade goods. Archaeologists digging in the ruins have found signs of desperation, broken tools, fragments of bone from animals not usually eaten, and layers of ash from burned buildings. There is evidence of a slow decline, a thinning of the population. As more and more souls faded away or moved south to safer shores, some scholars suggest that conflict with the indigenous Inuit, who were better adapted to the Arctic, may have added strain. The stone foundations and scattered artifacts are all that remain today, preserved beneath layers of moss and permafrost. They tell a quiet story, one of endurance, struggle, and slow disappearance. As you stand there now, the wind brushing softly against your cheeks, the distant cry of a raven echoes, and then gradually silence. The Greenland settlements are a ghostly reminder of how fragile human life can be in the face of nature's slow changes. But even in their fading, they whisper lessons of courage and endurance, of communities held together by hope, even as the cold closed in. Imagine yourself stepping through a heavy wooden door into a longhouse warmed by a great fire burning low in the center. The air is thick with the scent of burning wood, mingled with the faint aroma of smoked fish and roasting meat. The walls, made of timber and turf, echo faintly with the low murmur of voices, laughter, and the clinking of drinking horns. The longhouse is the heart of the community, the seat of the Jarl, the local chieftain, where power is woven into ritual, speech, and subtle social dance. Here the rhythm of life beats differently than in the cold fishing village outside. You notice the benches lining the walls, crowded with warriors draped in worn cloaks. Their eyes alert, yet weary from travel and battle. The Jarl sits at the high seat, his carved chair raised slightly above the others, his expression calm but watchful. Around him, the comings and goings are measured and deliberate. A guest arrives bearing a small gift, perhaps a finely wrought knife or a carved wooden cup. He offers it with a careful bow, eyes downcast for a moment, knowing the unspoken rules that govern these exchanges. To give well is to honor, to receive with grace is to maintain dignity. Gift-giving here is not mere politeness. It is a language of loyalty, obligation, and status. The Jarl accepts the gift with a nod, then offers a portion of mead from his horn, sealing the bond. Storytellers rise to recount old sagas, tales of gods and heroes, of far-off lands and battles won. Their voices are steady and calm, weaving words that bind the community together. Violence here is last resort, but the thread is never far. Salted pork, dried fish, barley bread, simple fare, but prepared with care and respect. In the vanished settlements, threads in the vast tapestry of Viking life. The fire flickers softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and the many small details that keep order within the hall. The code of honor governs every gesture and word, Insult is avoided at all costs, or met with sharp wit or measured response. Feasts are long and deliberate affairs, with food and drink shared in ritualized patterns. The Jarl's wife moves silently among the guests, her presence a quiet force, overseeing the hearth, the serving. Outside, the cold wind howls, but inside, the fire and the company provide warmth and protection. In this longhouse, the vast, untamed landscape feels momentarily held at bay by human connection, tradition, and the fragile dance of power. Imagine yourself here, surrounded by the low murmur of voices, the crackling of the fire, the rhythmic tapping of a wooden cup, a world apart from the fish guts and frozen fingers of the village. Yet all parts of this world are intertwined. The Jarl's longhouse, the fishing village, the voyages. Imagine waking before dawn in a small, felt-covered ger, the traditional tent of the Mongol Zits. Walls sturdy but thin, letting in the faint chill of the morning air. The scent of damp earth mingles with the faint smoke from the fire pit at the center. You rise slowly, feeling the rough felt beneath your fingers and the slight stiffness in your limbs from a restless night. Outside, the vast steppe stretches endlessly, a sea of golden grass swaying gently in the wind, dust hovering close to the ground. Your companion's family, warriors, servants are stirring, preparing for another day on the move. The caravan begins to stir as the horses are saddled and tethered, their breaths steaming in the cool morning air. The land is beautiful but harsh. Nights are cold, days are long, and the threat of attack or starvation is never far away. The food is simple and sparse. Dried meats, nuts, sometimes fresh game caught by skilled hunters, but often the taste of hunger lingers. You eat a sparse breakfast, dried meat, hard bread, and a small bowl of fermented mare's milk. Its temp sharp but strangely comforting. Life is rough and relentless, but also profoundly connected to the earth beneath your feet and the sky overhead. The rustle of grass, the soft murmur of your traveling companions settling for the night. The ger is packed swiftly, folded and strapped to a horse, then loaded onto carts or carried on backs. The caravan snakes across the steppe, a line of riders, herders, and traders cutting through the endless grass. Your life is a constant balance of motion and endurance. The sun climbs higher, its heat growing more intense. Dust rises around you, swirling in the dry wind, coating your skin and clothes with a fine grit. Sleep is precious, but often short, taken in the brief pauses between moving. The weight of constant alertness presses on your mind. The air is thick with the scent of leather, sweat, and horse. The steppe is wild, and enemies are close raiders, rival clans, or the harsh elements themselves. The risk of battle looms over every campfire, every night spent in the open. The steady clatter of hooves and the occasional shout or laugh create a rhythm sometimes comforting, sometimes sharp with tension. You move from place to place, never fully settling. Fatigue seeps into your bones. Your muscles ache from riding, lifting, and constant labor. Fear is a quiet companion. Yet, there is a strange rhythm here, a pulse tied to the movement of horses and the shifting of seasons. As you lie down again beneath the felt walls of your ger, the sounds of the steppe lull you, the distant call of a bird. In this vast, ancient landscape, every day is a struggle, every moment a test of endurance. Imagine the vast steppes again, but now through the eyes of a young boy born into a world fractured by clan rivalries and endless struggle. This boy would grow to become Genghis Khan, the great unifier and conqueror whose life reshaped the course of history. Born as Temujin around the 1160s, his early years were marked by hardship and survival. Imagine yourself beside him, a small child, watching as his father, a tribal leader, is poisoned by rivals. His early days are filled with lessons in loyalty and betrayal, alliance, and enmity. Each day is a step toward survival, a constant negotiation with harsh nature and hostile neighbors. His vision is not only to survive, but to build something enduring. A united Mongol nation, bound by law and loyalty. Discipline is strict, hierarchy clear, and failure costly. Yet there is also innovation, the organization of armies. The use of fast-moving cavalry and communication systems that stretch across the vast steppe. This code provides structure to a world that might otherwise dissolve into chaos. Suddenly, the boy and his family are cast out, left to wander the unforgiving steppe without protection. His legacy is vast, his empire one of the largest in history. But the life of those who followed him as warriors, his caravan followers, his family was often harsh. Bound by duty and constant readiness for war or travel, the boy learns quickly. He grows strong, agile, and cunning, skills necessary to endure. The world of Genghis Khan is one of both brutal endurance and visionary power. Temujin's rise to power is slow and steady, shaped by his remarkable ability to forge alliances and his ruthless efficiency in eliminating threats. Imagine the shifting sands of the steppe beneath your feet as the boy grows into a mana leader, whose presence commands respect and fear. He unites scattered tribes through a blend of diplomacy, marriage ties, and, when necessary, force. The life of a Mongol warrior under Genghis Khan is demanding. Imagine the clang of metal as warriors sharpen swords. The thunder of hooves as thousands of riders gather. It's preparing for campaigns that will stretch from the forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia. His tactics mix terror and pragmatism. Cities fall, but sometimes they are spared in exchange for submission and tribute. Genghis Khan's campaigns are relentless and expansive. He leads his forces with an unyielding will, striking swiftly and moving with surprising speed. Behind the force lies a complex legal code, the Yasa, governing behavior, property, and loyalty. The man known as the Wolf is both feared and respected. As night falls once more on the steppe, imagine the flicker of campfires scattered across the landscape. Warriors sharing quiet stories, strategizing for the days ahead. Now, let us leave the endless steppe behind for a moment and turn our attention to a place once alive with quiet power and complex rhythms. The ancient capital of the Mongol Empire, Karakorum. Imagine standing on the windswept plains of central Mongolia, where today only sparse grass and scattered stones hint at the grand city that once thrived here. Karakorum was founded in the early 13th century during Genghis Khan's son Gedei's rule. It served as the political and cultural heart of the empire, a meeting point of nomadic tradition and imperial ambition. Among the finds are fragments of fine ceramics, coins stamped with distant empires' marks, and even tools fashioned from whalebone, reminders of the vast trade networks reaching far beyond Mongolia's borders. Unlike the roaming camps of the steppe, Karakorum was a permanent settlement, with walls, palaces, temples, and bustling marketplaces. Imagine walking through its dusty streets, the scent of cooking fires mingling with the fresh, crisp air of the high plains. The city's fortunes rose and fell with the empire. Fires, invasions, and changing political tides eventually left Karakorum abandoned, swallowed by the steppe winds and forgotten for centuries. The city was a crossroads, where Persian glassware sparkled alongside Chinese silk. Each shard, each coin, and each inscription offers a whisper of life in a city that once hummed with energy amid the vastness of the Mongolian plains. The palace was more than a residence. It was a symbol, designed to impress visitors with the empire's power and reach. And the sounds of many languages drifted through the air: Mongolian, Turkic, Chinese, Persian, and more. Archaeologists today have uncovered fascinating remnants beneath the earth, revealing a city layered with stories. Hidden beneath the ruins, archaeologists discovered what might have been scribes' quarters rooms where scholars recorded the empire's history, laws, and correspondence. These records speak of a sophisticated administration, coordinating communication across thousands of miles, supported by the famous Yam courier system. One of the city's most intriguing features is the remains of a grand palace, its foundations hinting at elaborate halls where rulers convened and ceremonies unfolded. Around Karakorum stood temples of multiple faiths, Buddhist monasteries, Taoist shrines, and Christian churches, reflecting the Mongols' religious tolerance and the empire's vast cultural tapestry. Yet, despite its grandeur, Karakorum's life was precarious. Imagine now the quiet stillness of the site, as archaeologists gently brush away layers of earth, uncovering fragments of a vanished world. The story of Karakorum is one of contrasts between the nomadic and the settled, the simple and the complex, the eternal steppe and the fleeting city. Imagine yourself now inside the vast tent of the Great Khan, the supreme ruler of the Mongol Empire. This is no ordinary tent, but an imperial yurt, grand in scale and richly adorned, rising like a small palace amid the endless steppe. The air is filled with a mixture of scents fresh horsehide,
and the faint aroma of incense,
and the earthy smell of felt mats that cover the wooden floor. Flickering oil lamps cast soft shadows on embroidered silk hangings, depicting scenes of hunting, falconry, and celestial symbols. Imagine the crisp morning air as the Khan watches his trained falcons soar and dive, their sharp cries piercing the silence of the steppe. Falconry is more than a pastime. It is a symbol of power and mastery over nature, a reflection of the Khan's command over his realm. The Great Khan's court is a place of both ceremony and quiet calculation. Here, the rhythm of the day moves slowly, yet purposefully. Morning begins with falconry, a sport and art deeply embedded in Mongol culture. A simple meal is shared dried meats, fresh dairy, and steaming Thai before the court settles into reflective silence. The Khan's power is absolute, but constantly tested. Spies move silently, reporting rumors and secrets. The Great Khan listens, his thoughts distant yet present, before finally resting beneath the felt walls of his yurt. Diplomats carefully navigate shifting alliances, while warriors prepare quietly for the next campaign. Inside the yurt, advisors and nobles sit on cushions arranged in order of rank. The Great Khan listens patiently as envoys from far-flung lands present their gift silks from China, precious metals from Persia, spices from the West. These records will become the annals of empire, chronicling decisions that shape the fate of millions. These exchanges are both political and symbolic, affirming alliances and asserting dominance. Imagine the soft murmur of voices in various languages, the scratching of brushes as scribes record the day's proceedings in delicate Mongolian script. Yet beneath this calm surface, there is always an undercurrent of tension. The Great Khan's wife, the Khatan, holds her own quiet power within the tent. She manages the household, oversees ceremonies, and influences the Khan's decisions in subtle ways. Her presence is a reminder that even amid the vastness of the steppe, life is structured by rituals and relationships. As evening falls, imagine the soft glow of the fire pit, the crackling flames casting a warm light on faces lined with experience and care. The day ends with music deep, resonant tones from horsehair bows and wooden flutes, weaving a calm tapestry of sound. This is the quiet power of the Mongol court, where strength is measured not only by conquest, but by ceremony, diplomacy, and endurance. The sky outside is still dark when your day begins. Inside the servant quarters, small, stuffy, and shared, you wake not by choice but by obligation. The bell has not yet rung, but you must rise. You descend narrow stone steps, carrying flint, candle stubs, and kindling. You kneel. You strike the flint. You coax the flame. The fireplaces in the nobles' rooms must be warm before they awaken. If a lady of the court feels a chill, you may hear of it for weeks. Your breath is visible in the cold air. The fire has long since died out. Imagine yourself sitting upright on a thin straw mattress, surrounded by the quiet shuffle of others rising in silence. The servant's role is to fulfill these requests without error, and never to comment. Couriers arrive. Musicians tune instruments. Trays of food pass through servant corridors and disappear into state apartments. You hold out a lace cravat or help remove a nightshirt, eyes downcast. Cleaning in Versailles is discreet. A servant is meant to appear only when the noble has turned away. Bread with thin soup, perhaps. It's no time for warmth or comfort. You wipe beneath the legs of furniture, dust behind candelabras, and polish brass doorknobs with cloths that smell faintly of beeswax and lavender oil. You may be called to fetch something across the palace, perhaps a shawl from one of the countless antechambers. For the nobles, this is the time of dinners, games, and masked flirtations. You know, the secret passageways, the rhythm of the court, the quiet moments between ceremonies. For you, it is time to clean once more crushed crumbs from beneath brocade chairs, ash from fireplaces, discarded fans, or fallen gloves. You walk quickly but quietly. Your footsteps must never echo. If you become lost in the mirrored corridors, no one will pause to help you. When these occur, a servant is to take responsibility swiftly. There is no room for pride. Only efficiency, silence, and endless readiness. Candles flicker out one by one, like stars fading with the dawn. You return to your shared room, where the air is thick with smoke and sweat. There is no bath, no privacy, no rest from the stiffness in your knees. You fall into bed, fully clothed, knowing that the bell will ring again all too soon. Everything must gleam, but no one should see you make it so. A valet might do the talking. You simply smooth the wrinkles. There's no time to speak. Today, like every day, must run like the gears of a hidden machine. First comes the lighting of fires. The palace is cold in the early morning, no matter the season. The hearths are tall and wide, framed in gilded wood or carved stone, but they are not your concern. Then, the dressing chambers. You are not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You may clean, though never in the obvious sense. It is long, very long, and every reflective surface catches even the smallest smear. Your arms ache from polishing glass and gold. The Hall of Mirrors is perhaps the most exhausting room of all. The king himself rises later than most, around 8 or 9 o'clock. By that time, 100 invisible tasks have already been completed. His awakening, the lever, is a performance. Only the highest-ranking courtiers may attend. You, however, remain in the periphery, handing linens or retrieving hot water. The room is crowded, but only one man matters. The queen's routine is no less ceremonial, though in private moments, she may request music, a pet, or preferred fragrance. As the morning bleeds into midday, the palace comes alive with rustling gowns and hurried footsteps muffled by thick carpets. You eat quickly standing, if you eat at all. And then there are accidents, spills, breakages, a missing slipper. In the late afternoon, the air becomes heavy with perfumes and powdered wigs. Servants must stay alert, but unseen. Evening descends slowly over Versailles, golden light stretching long across the parquet floors. At last, the palace dims, and yet, this is your place. You live at Versailles. You walk through rooms others only dream of. You are a servant in the palace of kings. No one knows your name. Imagine her first, not as a queen, but as a girl. 14 years old, stepping off the carriage after a long journey from Austria. The wind stirs her fine gown as she crosses the bridge into France. Behind her, the land of her birth. Before her, a future that will be both glittering and cruel. How to sit, how to eat, how to smile without showing too much emotion. A queen must be admired, not understood. Ladies of rank gather to assist her dressing, each waiting for her precise moment to offer a sleeve or corset lace. Privacy does not exist here, not for royalty. She is Marie Antoinette, the daughter of an empress, and soon to be dauphin wife, to the heir of the French throne. She learns how to please a crowd, how to walk without seeming to walk, how to exist under the weight of constant expectation. And in time, she becomes queen. Her name echoes through history, but in this moment, she is simply a teenager, awkward and unsure. With powdered hair and court-approved manners, the noise grows louder. In 1789, a sea of angry citizens floods Versailles. The royal family is forced to Paris, to the Tuileries. It is not safety, but surveillance. At Versailles, nothing is private. Every step she takes is observed, every glance recorded. The rooms are grand, gilded, and filled with the scent of roses and varnished wood. But the rules are endless. And Marie Antoinette, once the most fashionable woman in Europe, poits alone in a cold cell at the conciergerie. Her hair turns white in weeks. She is trained in them from the start. Her hands are bound. She walks past a crowd that once cheered her carriage. Now they jeer. Mornings begin with the toilette, a ritual that seems both absurd and exhausting. She was a young woman, born into a role she could not shape, a life gilded and confined, from the first curtsy to the final fall. She apologizes to the executioner for stepping on his foot, and then, like so many others in that bloody year, she disappears beneath the blade. She learns French quickly, though her accent lingers. To the hidden door behind the queen's bedchamber, through which she once fled, her perfume lingers faintly, even now. She laughs too loudly, they say. Her fashion is extravagant, her spending impulsive. The woman who bankrupts France with her dresses and games. She builds a fantasy village at Petit Trianon, where she can pretend, for a few hours, to live like a shepherdess. She is young, so young, and the court whispers about her. She does not produce an heir quickly. She enjoys parties. Newspapers mocking your voice, your hair, your womb. courtiers smiling and scheming, lovers of your husband jockeying for power. And always, the walls of Versailles close in. No matter how large the palace, the air grows thinner each year. But imagine the pressure. 1,000 eyes watching your every breath. Outside, the people of France are hungry. Price of bread rises. Pamphlets spread full of rumor and venom. Madame Deficit, they call her. Inside the palace, the queen walks slower now. Her gaze drifts. She holds her children closer. She grows wary of mirrors and portraits. And then revolution. She writes letters now, carefully, quietly. She plans escape. She clings to the hope of rescue, but the net draws tighter. By 1792, the monarchy is abolished. The king is imprisoned, then executed. They take her to the scaffold on a gray October morning in 1793. She wears a plain white dress. She steps onto the platform with steady grace. But let's return to Versailles, the mirrors still reflecting candlelight. She was never just a villain, it's never only a victim. And still, her name endures spoken softly, like a sigh through silk curtains. Imagine descending beneath the marble floors of Versailles. Above, the glittering halls buzz with ceremony and whispers. But down here, where the air grows damp and the echoes stretch long, another world quietly unfolds. A world of narrow corridors, silent staircases, and stone passageways hidden beneath the grandeur. Servants rush through them, unseen by noble eyes. Guards pace their patrols. Imagine them, corridors carved behind false walls, stairwells tucked within columns, trapdoors beneath tapestries. At times, the halls feel more like a maze than a building. Turn the wrong way, and you may find yourself beneath the wrong wing. Or worse, beneath the queen's apartments without permission. Courtiers plot, sometimes in hushed voices far from candlelight. A love letter passed down a corridor, a bribe left in a carved niche. A conversation overheard at the wrong moment. These things mattered, and they traveled quickly in the dark. It was through this door that Marie Antoinette attempted to flee during the storming of Versailles in 1789. Imagine her breath quickening, slippers tapping on the stone floor. The sound of chaos rising outside and her desperate attempt to escape through a hallway meant not for escape, but for discretion, or for visitors to observe a royal physician slipping into the Dauphin's rooms. But they were just as vital as the halls above. Others were built for more urgent purposes, emergency exits, concealed routes to allow the king and queen to flee should the court become dangerous. Some were simple architectural solutions, channels for waste and water, built out of sight to preserve the illusion of perfection. Only the muffled echo of footsteps errs, perhaps following the quiet rhythm of a place designed to be hidden. Even today, when visitors walk the palace grounds, they are unaware of the many levels beneath their feet, or perhaps they simply wait for no one in particular, beneath a world built on appearances. But down here, in the quiet corridors, little changes. These passageways have waited in stillness, century after century, beneath the weight of history. These are the unseen veins of Versailles. They carry not blood, but breath movement, messages, and necessity. The palace above is a masterpiece of disinernate and theatrical. But it depends entirely on these quieter spaces below. Some of these tunnels were designed for discretion. It would not do for nobles to see chambermaids scurrying with laundry. There were hatches behind walls that opened onto key chambers, used by servants, spies, or simply by curious ears hoping to glean a whisper of court intrigue. Yet others served different needs entirely. There were corridors known only to a handful of guards, allowing secret observation of meetings. Your day begins well before sunrise, and your duty is silence. You move through these underground spaces swiftly, hands full of linen or trays, heart pounding as you pass beneath the grand apartments. You cannot speak. You must not be seen. And if a noble happens to use the stairwell ahead of you, you must freeze, pressing yourself into the shadows, eyes lowered. Imagine for a moment being one of those servants. These passageways also carried rumors. Courtiers would send secret messages via trusted valets who knew every shortcut. Rendezvous were arranged in service tunnels, political or otherwise. One particularly famous hidden door still exists behind the Queen's bedchamber. The tunnels beneath Versailles are rarely mentioned in the usual histories. They do not gleam with gold. They were not painted by court artists. They were the lungs of the palace, allowing it to breathe unseen. The cool air here smells of dust, old plaster, and faint mold. There is no music. Some of these spaces have collapsed. Others are sealed, and a few remain unexplored, sealed behind stones or forgotten blueprints. In time, the palace above would change. Kings would fall. Crowds would come and go. Perhaps they still hold secrets. Now, let us rise from the dim, secret tunnels to the blinding light of the Hall of Mirrors. Imagine yourself not as a servant now, but as a noble. You walk slowly on polished floors, shoes clicking softly beneath you. Your garments rustle layers of silk and lace, carefully arranged. You are powdered, perfumed, and precisely painted. The air around you is sweet with ambergris and orange blossom, cut faintly by beeswax and human breath. This is not a place to rest. It is a place to be seen. Life at court was not just luxurious, it was a performance. Attendants helped him dress, while nobles waited for a glance or a word. To hand him a glove or a sleeve was an honor fought over with quiet ferocity. A noble might spend years angling for the right to sit on a stool in the queen's presence. Every right, every privilege was documented, disputed, and deeply political. But beneath it all, Versailles had its own underlying odor, a mix of stone and sweat, candle wax and muslin. Perfume was not just adornment, it was armor, and you, if fortunate, might be permitted to linger, to comment, to be remembered. Yet even as you danced, you calculated, you weighed each word, you measured how long to speak, how far to bow, how loud to laugh. One wrong step, one misplaced word, and the king's eye would pass over you. And in a world where favor was currency, invisibility was ruin, there were coded greetings to offer, subtle alliances to maintain. A raised eyebrow might signal approval, a lowered gaze might indicate defeat. Each gesture, each word, each bow or curtsy was part of a delicate choreography. The king's gaze was your sun. To be noticed was to rise. To be forgotten was to fall. You do not sleep easily. The walls are thin. The whispers continue. And tomorrow, once again, you must rise early, dress carefully, and enter the game. Their rooms, small and sparse, often without private washrooms, betrayed the reality beneath the opulence. Space was scarce. Privacy was rare, and the rules were many. Beneath it, the daily rhythm of the nobles was a quiet struggle. For relevance, for security, for survival. Not unlike the servants below, wrapped in silk. And so, from morning until night, nobles walked the marble halls, with one eye on the mirrors and the other on each other. You might stand and watch him eat, hoping for a nod. You did not sit without permission. You did not speak freely. Conversation was measured. Every word had weight. You learned to speak in compliments, to argue in flattery, and to insult without using a single harsh word. The scent of perfume masked more than body odor. It cloaked tension. Intrigue hung as thick as cologne. Every alliance was temporary. Every rival wore a smile. The nobles of Versailles lived close to the center of power, yet many were far from comfort. There were rituals for everything. Imagine standing among a crowd just to watch the king rise in the morning, known as the lever. Meals were public. Even the king's dinners drew spectators. The palace was alive with symbols. The fleur-de-lis, the sunburst, the golden lilies woven into tapestries. The furnishings were statements. Chairs had meaning. And always, there was the perfume. The court was awash in it. Scent was layered upon scent. Powdered wigs dusted with lavender, gloves steeped in violet water, handkerchiefs dabbed with rose and bergamot. You might spend your afternoons strolling in the formal gardens, your pace slow and deliberate. At night, the court sparkled with candlelight. Balls, suppers, concerts, each event another chance to be visible, to belong, to survive. This was not frivolity. This was survival. The nobility of Versailles were not idle. Were occupied by the endless maintenance of favor. Imagine ending your day in a chamber lined with tapestries, your head resting against a pillow filled with goose feathers. Life at court was gilded, but gilding is only surface deep. The palace was a stage, and everyone's servant or sovereign was part of the play. Imagine yourself in a courtyard, surrounded by sun-baked walls. The year is perhaps 1750 BCE. The air is dry and warm. The scent of clay thick in your nostrils, and the only shade is from low awnings, draped with woven reeds. You are a scribe, not yet masterful, still learning. Your fingers ache. In your right hand, you hold your stylus, a slender reed cut to a sharp wedge. You dip it, not in ink, but into the clay itself. And with each press, you carve a sign, then another, then another. Before you is a small rectangular tablet of freshly smoothed clay, cool to the touch. You rise from a mat laid on packed earth, the room still dim. The distant hum of livestock and water pullers growing slowly louder. You eat little, a smear of dates, perhaps a crust of barley breadened. You hurry to your post in the school or scribal house. Each one must be precise, tilted just so. One wrong mark, and the word becomes meaningless, or worse, misleading. Mistakes are not easily erased. You cannot simply wipe the slate clean. No, to correct an error, you must smooth the tablet again and begin from the start. And in a world where a tablet might be a receipt, a record of taxes, or an inventory of temple goods, mistakes can carry consequences. Legal phrases, measurements, prayers, genealogies, mythic verses. There are over 600 characters in cuneiform, many of them subtle variations. Some are phonetic, others logographic. You will be sought by merchants and priests. You may record temple offerings, dictate contracts, even write to kings. Yours will be the voice of others, immortalized in hardened earth. A poorly kept record could bankrupt a merchant. False inventory could anger a priest. A miswritten law might doom an innocent man. And many signs change depending on where they fall in the sentence. You begin with simple lists: sheep, barley, beer, fish. You clean your stylus, dust the last of your tablets, and store them carefully stacked in shelves, dried in the sun or baked in kilns. Then you return to your house, where a simple lamp flickers, and your eyes still trace invisible wedges in the air. A sudden shout from the master startles you. Your mark was crooked. Over and over, you press the symbols into clay. One for sheep, one for unit, one for number. In the temple, the palace, and the street, all rest quietly, invisibly on your hands. The process is rhythmic, even meditative, but it is not easy. The day begins before the sun crests the mud brick walls. There, your teacher is waiting. He is stern. His patience is limited. He has already copied thousands of signs in his life, and he expects your hand to be steady and your focus unwavering. The clay dries too fast in the heat. Your wrist cramps. The reed splits. A thin layer of dust settles over everything: your tablet, your sleeves, your eyelashes. You break for a drink of water, perhaps cooled in a clay jar by evaporation. If you're lucky, a thin meal follows: lentils, onions, perhaps a dried fig. Then back to work. You start again. At midday, the sun climbs high and the courtyard swelters. The walls reflect heat. There is no rest from repetition. You are not just learning how to write. You are learning what to write. To write well is to master the shifting bones of a living language, and few do. But if you succeed, if your stylus finds rhythm and your clay dries straight, you will become more than a laborer. Still, there is risk. Some scribes are punished for errors, fined, demoted, even beaten. Others are envied, targeted by rivals. Clay remembers everything. Evening comes slowly. The sun dips low, and the day's heat lifts. Tomorrow, you will write again, for the city depends on your marks. Gods demand their records. Let us drift forward now, from the dusty courtyard of a scribal apprentice to the great heart of Babylon itself. The city hums with labor, and its streets are lined with carved gates and carefully laid brick. Overhead, the sun gleams on ziggurat terraces, and in the markets, traders call out beneath bright awnings of dyed wool. But to understand what he did not just as ruler, but as codifier, you must see him not as legend, but as man. A man ruling a growing city-state, surrounded by rival powers and shifting allegiances. A man tasked with not just leading an empire, but organizing one. Beneath all of this, beneath the noise and bustle, something is formed, and quietly, patiently, in the halls of power, law. And behind that law, a king, Hammurabi. You may know his name, passed down through millennia. Hammurabi rose to power in the early 18th century BCE, ruling over a Babylon that was still defining itself. And the scribes, dozens of them, begin their quiet work. Styluses press into clay, preserving each law as it takes form. Each follows a logic, clear cause and effect. Some are terrifyingly rigid. Others are protective. Hammurabi's code isn't meant to be gentle. It is meant to bring order to a chaotic world. At its top, a carving shows Hammurabi receiving authority from Shamash, the sun god of justice. It is not just a code, it is a message. You cannot read them, not unless you are trained. But you know what they mean? They mean that justice, however imperfect, is no longer arbitrary. That merchants, midwives, slaves, and farmers now live under a common set of rules. That punishment has boundaries. That contracts mean something. A declaration that this law, these words, are divine and enduring. Surrounded by competing city-states like Larsa, Ishnana, and Mari, his early years were filled with strategy more than conquest. A widow argues her claim with a borrowed scribe. A city judge consults the law before rendering a decision, and behind it all, unseen, are the styluses and tablets, the tired hands, the smeared clay, the weary eyes of those who carved the law into permanence. But Hammurabi's code is among the first to be carved for all to see, not just remembered or passed in courts. Clay tablets scattered across a low table. Advisors seated in silence, scribes leaning forward with styluses poised. A world where a noble's life weighs more than a slave's, where property means protection, and where words matter as much as actions. A long procession of problems comes before him. Disputes over land, accusations of theft, conflicts between merchants, questions of marriage, of adoption, of debt. He forged alliances, honored gods, balanced tribute and strength. On training tablets, on official records, in schools, stylus repeats the same words again and again. If a man, ... if a woman, if a builder, but always his mind turned to structure. Imagine him in his palace, deep in thought. Later cultures, Assyrians, Persians, Hebrews, Greeks all carry echoes of its form. Even millennia later, the rhythm of law, of precedent, of defined justice, owes something to Hammurabi's clay-bound decree. Each situation different, yet similar, each one demanding consistency. The builder shall be put to death. And so he begins to write. But not directly. No king carves his own code. He speaks, deliberates, dictates. He shall present a sealed tablet accounting for it. If a man builds a house for another and does not make its construction firm, and the house collapses and causes death, if a son strikes his father, his hand shall be cut off. If a merchant gives silver to a trader for investment, the laws are firm, often harsh, but they are also structured. It isn't the first legal code in human history. The Sumerians and the Elamites had laws before him. One steeler, then a man, curved at the top, engraved with over 280 laws, written in cuneiform. Imagine approaching the steeler. You run your fingers over the wedge-shaped signs, slightly smoothed by time. But imagine, too, the scribes who recorded these rules, not once, but many times. The code covers debts and divorce, oxen and orchards, false accusations and river crossings. It reflects a world built on layers of class and responsibility. Over time, the code travels. Not physically, but ideologically. But here, in this moment, under a Babylonian sun, it is still new. A merchant kneels before a temple, clutching a tablet. Hammurabi may have ruled with strength, but it was the scribes of those quiet, dusty recorders who ensured that his voice would survive the centuries. And survive it did. The sun sets slowly over Babylon, casting long shadows across the stone stela. The laws are silent, but they remain. Let us now step back. Further still, long before Babylon, before Hammurabi, before the carved laws and palace intrigue, there was a place where writing itself was born, a place of reeds and riverbanks, of sun-baked bricks and bustling courtyards, a place called Uruk. The name is soft and short, but it echoes through time. It sits in the southern reaches of Mesopotamia, near the banks of the Euphrates River. Today it is a scatter of ruins beneath a sky vast and unchanging. Crumbled walls, broken pottery, and parched soil are all that remain to the eye. But long ago, in the 4th millennium BCE, Uruk stood as something entirely new. A city. The people who lived there learned to harness the waters, digging canals and shaping the land. A collective record, a plan for tomorrow. They grew grains, raised sheep, crafted pottery, but they also did something else. They organized. It is not a place of residence, nor a defensive fort. It is a statement, an axis between earth and sky. A place where the divine touches the human, where offerings are brought with care, where priests murmur ancient hymns and light incense in the heat of afternoon. Oxen trudge through narrow lanes, their hooves striking the same packed earth, walked by generations. And scribes are copying, tallying, listing. Their styluses scratch into wet tablets with soft clicks, like rain on a roof. Not a cluster of huts, not a farming village, but a true urban center, teeming with complexity. Offerings of food and flowers line its edges. Above, the wind tugs at thin linen banners. In the soil were discarded tablets, broken pots, tools worn smooth with use, each one a whisper from the past. You climb slowly, and with each step, you feel the scope of what was built, not just by muscle, but by planning, by collaboration, by a vision of permanence. You can place your palm on a brick that once held up a city. You can feel the silence where once there was rhythm. Their meanings are not always clear, but their presence speaks volumes. Systems of storage, of labor, of offerings, of exchange. Grain, sheep, beer, labor, clay tablets preserved it all. You might be standing outside a granary now, where hundreds of clay pots hold measured quantities of barley. At its peak, tens of thousands may live here. The rivers shift, the soil weakens, new powers rise in nearby cities. The ziggurats crumble, the temples fall silent, wind and dust return. But the idea of Uruk never quite disappears. Its walls stretch miles around. Its temples become more elaborate. Scribes refine their writing from pictures to symbols, from symbols to syllables. Language itself, as we now understand it, begins to form. Words can now capture not just things, but thoughts. Nearby, a temple administrator marks symbols into wet clay wedge shapes that represent numbers, goods, and names. Imagine yourself there. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of clay and river reeds. Streets wind unevenly between buildings made of mud brick, their walls thick to keep out the heat. In one direction, markets buzz softly with the hum of barter dates and barley traded in baskets. In another, a procession winds toward a towering temple, where offerings are being prepared for Inanna, goddess of love and war. The city is busy, but not hurried. There's a rhythm here, as steady as the river's pulse. It is the rhythm of a people who are building something they cannot yet name a civilization. Uruk wasn't built all at once. It began as a settlement by the riverside, drawn by the richness of the floodplain. As the city grew, so too did the need for systems. This is where writing began, not for poetry or storytelling, but for tracking things. And here in Uruk, you see the earliest signs of what a city must become. Not just walls and roofs, but a shared memory. There is a ziggurat rising above the city's center-stepped temple platform built layer by layer, towering over the flat horizon. Imagine standing at its base. You tilt your head upward and see stairs worn smooth by thousands of feet. And all around the ziggurat, life continues. Artisans shape seals and beads. Children play with clay toys. Uruk is not just buildings, it is an idea. That people can live together in great numbers, share resources, manage disputes, and leave a trace. Over centuries, Uruk changes. It grows. It contracts. Eventually, Uruk declines. The people who lived here, who pressed red styluses into soft clay, did not know they were creating what we now call history. But they were. When archaeologists first uncovered the ruins, they found layers upon layers of habitation, stacked like the pages of a book. Some of the earliest known writing was found here, signs and marks made by anonymous hands over 5,000 years ago. Even now, under the sun of southern Iraq, you can walk among the crumbled walls of Uruk, and you can listen, if only quietly, for what the first city still tells us. The idea of order, of memory, of shared space and recorded thought. Uruk may be silent, but it was never forgotten. Now let us step through another threshold. From the crumbling clay walls of Uruk to the carefully planned grandeur of a royal palace massive, closed, humming with quiet ceremony. Though names and eras shift, The atmosphere remains remarkably constant, structured, formal, and quietly immense. Eunuchs, trusted administrators in this world, carry clay tablets from chamber to chamber, their sandals softly patting the stone floors. The air is still and warm, thick with the mingling scents of cedar wood, perfumed oil, and drying papyrus. The world of a Mesopotamian king was one of order and ritual, where power flowed not only from the gods above, but through layers of scribes, priests, messengers, and merchants. Imagine yourself within the palace of a king in Babylon, or perhaps in Assur or Nineveh during the height of Assyrian power. Copy legal contracts, royal decrees, lists of tribute, and inventories of goods received from faraway lands. You may never speak to the king, but you are the memory of his realm. Chief scribes carry seals, sign documents, oversee temples and treasuries. Here are letters from governors in distant provinces, treaties with rival kings, oaths sworn, shipments received. The quiet hum of history, stored in earthen form. They attend to the king's correspondence and speak with the viziers, the high counselors who administer cities, armies, and irrigation. Without you, there is no continuity, no law, no archive of what is past. You are the thread holding the bureaucracy together. You are not alone. The palace is not a place of leisure, but of constant motion. Servants sweep courtyards with reed brooms, stewards inventory, stores of incense and oil, a shaded space lined with stone benches and wooden stools. Before the judge's dais, complainants stand, traders in dispute, farmers arguing over land, families appealing verdicts. Witnesses are called, documents are read aloud. A scribe records it all. Each one has a clay tablet balanced on a knee or low table. At the far end, the throne itself elevated, flanked by sculpted guardians, Lamassu. With their wings, hooves, and solemn human faces, codes like Hammurabi's are cited. Justice, though harsh by modern measure, is predictable. War and peace, appointments, temple endowments. Here the fate of provinces may be sealed with a glance, a gesture, a seal pressed into clay. There, the king's household is a small world of its own. Wives, children, advisors, guards, musicians. Private shrines burn oil beside silver statues. A harp is softly played in a shaded corner. Meals are taken in silence, accompanied by ritual and form. Property, contracts, debt, and inheritance, these are the matters that fill the courtroom more than any crime. A small basin of water keeps the clay pliable. Styluses rest beside them, recut, worn smooth by use. The scratching sound is constant, like distant insects in a field. In the palace, power is heavy and sleep is light. It is what keeps water flowing in the canals, what sends armies across the plains, what delivers offerings to temples 100 miles away. The king, at the heart of it all, is rarely seen. To the treasuries, where beads of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan lie beside bronze tools and golden bowls. To the audience chamber, where the walls are painted with mythic scenes, kings in battle, gods granting favor, lions felled by a single arrow. A scribe may speak on your behalf. Gifts may be offered, textiles, spices, fine carvings, metalwork, contracts, poems, laws, letters, but of fathers naming sons, of barley rations measured out, of a temple's yearly incense count. His presence is not casual. He appears according to ritual, veiled by layers of hierarchy. From the dry plains where kings inscribed their edicts to the cool shadows of the palace halls, where power moved unseen, we have wandered slowly, carefully, through the rhythms of ancient Mesopotamian life. But when we slow down, when we let the pace of ancient life unfold, in all its small, dusty detail, it becomes something else, familiar, human, close. Theirs was a life of quiet endurance, of precision, of deep knowledge paired with deep fatigue. Let your mind wander like a river through old clay channels, by people who, like us, rose in the morning, worried about food, endured their days, and longed for the comfort of sleep. For a quiet ending at the close of a long day remains, and though they seldom wore crowns or rode chariots into battle, they built something that lasted longer than any empire. When he does emerge, seated beneath a shaded canopy, adorned in embroidered robes. Ringed by guards and court officials, he is a living symbol of divine favor. But before reaching his presence, one must move through corridors of duty and protocol. Let us begin in the scribal chamber. Here, beneath narrow windows that filter golden sunlight, scribes are seated in quiet rows. Scribes are not free writers. They transcribe dictated letters, record tax lists, track offerings to temples. To be a scribe is to live in the margins of power. Some scribes rise above the rest. Beyond the scribal wing lies the palace archive, rows upon rows of shelved clay tablets, each marked, categorized, indexed with care. Step now into the court of justice. The rule of law, in this place, is grounded in centuries of precedent. The rhythm is slow, deliberate. There are no speeches, no drama, the measured unfolding of law. But let us move deeper still, to the royal kitchens, where rows of clay ovens bake flatbread for the day. And finally, to the throne room. It is vast, yet quiet. Cool air filters in through stone screens. No one speaks here unless invited. If you are fortunate or unfortunate enough to stand before the king, you bow low, you wait. The king may nod, but more often than not, the throne room is not for ceremony, but for decisions. And behind the throne lies the royal residence of Flemets to most. Even rest is a performance of order. For all its grandeur, the palace is also a cage. Every movement is observed. Every word may be recorded. Appearances must be preserved. And yet, this structure, this layered, careful world is what allows a king's rule to extend across mountains and deserts. It is a city within a city, a world within a world. And at its heart, the whisper of styluses across clay, the cool silence of thick walls, the slow, steady rhythm of Mesopotamian life. And so, we draw our long, gentle journey to a close. From the dimly lit scribe's room, where young boys shape the future on blocks of soft clay, to the towering ziggurats of ancient cities, where gods were honored in smoke and stone, was a world of immense complexity. A world built not just of bricks and irrigation canals, but of lists. And at the center of it all, the scribe. Bent over his work, stylus in hand, surrounded by the faint scent of damp earth and oil lamp smoke. A memory, a record, the voice. The soft press of stylus into clay was not just labor, it was legacy. And in these humble tablets we hear echoes not only of kings and wars, the mundane preserved with care, the ordinary made eternal. It is easy, from the comfort of our beds, to think of the past as distant. Tonight, as you drift off, know that beneath your rest lies a history shaped by tired hands. By scribes who worked by flickering light, the world may have changed, but the need for stories, for memory. So let your breath settle. You are safe. You are still. And somewhere far behind your thoughts, the soft scratch of a reed stylus continues. Good night.